Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, and hereby call it to order and ask your participation and invitation with me. Dear God, thank you for all the blessings you've given our county and communities, and be with our first responders as they seek to aid us and take care of us when we're in need. Be with this commission today as they make decisions for the county and cities within it, and help us to make good decisions. Amen. We have an introduction first.
Yes, Volker Inc. is here to introduce themselves. This is who we've been talking about for the technical specialist or the engineering consultant to provide us services for unincorporated Boyle, Junction, and Perryville for engineering. So they're here to introduce themselves, and then we can talk about the contract and all that at the end of the agenda.
Okay.
Hi, most of you know me. I'm Rich Murphy, the Boyle County Surveyor, and I work for Volkert as well. And just wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm here with Sarah Scott. She works at Volkert as well, and we're just wanting to help out any way we can with the engineering services. Is there any questions or anything? I think you guys know me pretty well from some of the other stuff too.
I met with Volkert last Friday just to discuss kind of our scope of services and what they could provide. So we're really looking at street review, drainage, stormwater, that aspect of our review that we haven't really had since the county engineer has retired and not been replaced. So we've talked about this with our budget review and proposals that we want to bring in a technical specialist. And so this is who I've met with. They have a partnership with the county. Obviously, Rich is our county surveyor, so I do think it's a good fit. But if you all have any questions for them as we're considering this option, feel free to ask them while they're here.
Excuse me, Taylor, does this not include Junction City? They're not in this?
No, it does.
It does?
Yep, it would include Junction, Perryville, and unincorporated Boyle. I believe right now Josh is still aligned to do the reviews for Danville, but if that evolves as we go, then we would just work through that. So, yep.
And we did allocate funding in the financial numbers for this type of service this year.
We did, yes.
So do we need a motion to accept their position now?
Not at this point. I did put it later in the agenda so we can discuss it. They want to come down and introduce themselves, so if you all have any questions, now's the time. But we can talk about the contract and things later.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Anybody have any questions about the minutes?
Just one correction. Mr. Chair, there's a note in the minutes about Mr. Morgan. It's on the third page. It's Mark Morgan. It says Mike, so it's correct that. And I'll move to accept the minutes as amended.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Motion carries. We have a financial report.
Yeah, if you turn to the financial report, this is through May, so 11 of the 12 months of our fiscal year. If you go about two-thirds of the way down the front page under total commission revenue, you can see that through 11 months, our revenue has been $163,725. If you look at to where it would have been if we'd be exactly on budget for the first 11 months, we're about $15,000 below that. About half of that is because the county hadn't made their fourth quarter payment yet. And the other half is because our subdivision apps and zoning permits are running behind what we had forecasted they would be. And if you look at the next page, about 2/3 of the way down, at total commission expenses, I just mentioned that our revenue is $15,000 below plan. Our expenditures are actually almost $50,000 below plan. And 30,000 of that is under total personnel, and the big part of that is the health and dental insurance that we had budgeted for, that the county chose to pick up for us this year. About 5,000 is total office, which is advertising and office equipment spending. About $6,000 of that $50,000 below plan is total contractual services, and that's attorney fees. I assume that's timing. Yeah, we just hadn't received the invoice yet. And then about $4,000 was total commission expenses, and I think that's just because our comprehensive plan isn't proceeding as quickly as we thought, and we hadn't spent the money we thought we would spend on public meetings and that type of thing. So that pretty much summarizes where we are through 11 months of the 12-month fiscal year. Any questions?
Thank you.
So we need a motion to accept.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the financial report.
I'll make a motion to accept the financial report, please.
We second it then, okay. All in favor? The motion carries. Moving on to construction sureties. First one's Boyle County Industrial Foundation.
Yep. The Boyle County Industrial Foundation, they're asking to renew their letter of credit in amount of $523,000. We have renewed this bond 3 times. They are essentially under an option for this lot that they created with this plat, with the agreement to build Rickhouse Road for 2 more years. I have asked for a revised cost estimate. They did send it over. I just haven't gotten complete thumbs up by Marshall and Josh yet, so I didn't want to bring that number forward for this meeting. I think we'll bring it forward at the next meeting. But essentially, I think we are looking at extending this for an additional 2 years, which is why I asked for the revised cost estimate. So that's where we're at with this one. Typically, we don't like to extend it beyond the 3 years, and this is kind of a special circumstance for this situation.
Yeah, and the economy, I think, deserves to have a revised, more accurate number. That's one of the
Yep.
key elements on here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, so that's where we're at with it. We could, extend it for a month. We can just conditionally renew it, at the cost estimate once it's approved. I believe off the top of my head, it's about $725,000, so it did go up significantly. I do expect Marshall and Josh to approve it at some point, if not some minor tweaks. So if you all want to conditionally approve it upon staff review and approval, so they can bond it within this month, or if you just want to essentially renew it for a month and then me bring that number back to you all at the next
I'd like
meeting.
to, personally, I'd like to do it on a month-to-month basis. We'll just
Okay.
extend it for the 1 month and allow you to, and the right people to have time to look at that $700,000 number.
Yep.
Make sure it contains the elements we want, or that's appropriate.
Do you make a motion then?
If that's okay, I'd like to make a motion to that effect too, please.
Do we have a second?
I'd second that.
Any discussion, further discussion? Okay, let's vote then, all in favor of Sam's motion. Motion carries.
All right, Team Leader LLC, May Boulevard, reduce the letter of credit from $1,484,140 to $300,000, and renew the letter of credit in the amount of $300,000. This is the road out by Chick-fil-A, so it's not the road that Tank Boulevard is what we've been calling it. I think it will be called something different. The one that's completely shut off right now. May Boulevard is being used currently. They're reconstructing some of the curbs, things like that. But they are asking for a reduction. And this has been reviewed by staff, and so they're asking for an additional year extension.
So it does not include going out to that little, under the gas lines, or above the gas lines? Fine.
No.
Do we have a motion?
And it's bonded for that, it's bonded for that amount?
What's that?
The bond is still good when they reduce the letter of credit?
Yeah, so when they reduce it, we would, typically they submit a letter of credit for a year. And so they would submit a revised letter of credit in the amount of 300,000 rather than the 1.4 million that we currently hold. A large portion of it is done. There were just some issues with the curbs. There are some issues with the sidewalks that are being worked through with Josh. But that's where we're at. We still don't currently hold a bond for the Tank Boulevard where the gas easements are, so.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to accept that.
Okay. Have a second?
A second.
All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Shelby Green's the next one.
Yep, Shelby Green Limited, Shelby Green Phase 2, Section 2. They are asking to reduce the letter of credit from 369,900 to 73,980. That should also say and to renew it for an additional year. I had some questions about this one. This went through Planning Commission and construction plans were submitted prior to me starting here. But my understanding upon review is that it looks like they were accepted under our old subregs, which would typically require the 4-foot sidewalks on both sides. I believe at some point before I started, there was an agreement in place. I spoke to Steve Hunter about this to gain his recollection on it, that there was an agreement in place to waive the sidewalks on one side, but I don't believe Planning Commission ever formally did that. I think it was supposed to be done when the bond was collected. I collected the bond. I did not have Planning Commission do this when we accepted it 2 years ago. Like I said, the construction plans were submitted, approved, reviewed. I think it was part of the discussion of bringing prior sections into compliance. But if you all don't feel comfortable with that waiver and want me to, Luther might have more insight on it now. He didn't recall yesterday afternoon. We haven't spoke since, so,
Do you want me to speak to that?
yeah.
All right.
If you would, give your name and address and then.
Okay.
then you're
I'm
welcome to
Luther
speak.
Galloway with AGE Engineering Services. This is a long story. I'm going to try to make it as short and as brief as possible. Phase 2, or Section 2 of Phase 2 of Shelby Green was developed last year, I guess it was, and is still under construction. There's still a small portion that's available or still to be done. The surface asphalt hadn't been finished yet, and that's really all that was left to be done to the project. So that's why we're renewing the letter of credit. This project fell into the time frame when Junction City was coming back into planning and zoning, and your planning and zoning regulations were changing. In other words, your subdivision restrictions were changing. So there was a transition period when this was all coming about, and this subdivision was coming in during that transition period. To complicate the issue, Section 1 of Shelby Green there was developed while Junction City was not in planning and zoning, and and Junction City did not have any subdivision regulations, did not have any regulations whatsoever on what to do for new streets within the city because they were not in planning and zoning at the time. So that subdivision was built without curb and gutter, with curb and gutter, but without sidewalk. Section 2 that ties into Section 1, of course, is under planning and zoning again. So it was going to be tying into a subdivision with no sidewalk. In other words, the sidewalks were going to come down and end into somebody's yard. Junction City got involved in the discussions, and we had numerous meetings with the city council over a period of time over this. And they were requesting that sidewalks be built in that section of Shelby Green, even though there were no standards to do so. In addition to that, they further complicated the issue by bringing up the issue with Breathitt Avenue, Breathitt Drive, the road that comes in through the new, I guess, apartments or townhouses, you want to call it, coming off of 127, was in pretty bad shape. It needed resurfacing. Junction City refused to do that, saying that the developer needed to do it, okay? Well, that section of Breathitt Avenue had been built over 20 years ago and had been built under planning and zoning requirements and met planning and zoning requirements and had been completed 20 years prior. But the developer, in order to move everything forward, did agree to resurface Breathitt Avenue at tremendous expense. And they did that. That has been completed. In addition, they agreed to install street lights and sidewalk on one side of the street in Section 1 of Phase 2 development, the section that was developed outside of planning and zoning requirements. As part of that, Steve and the City of Junction was all part of this discussion on what to do in the section that we're talking about here for this letter of credit. And the agreement was that we would continue the sidewalks on one side in both sections of Section 1 and Section 2 of that. The construction plans were submitted to Steve, including all of the stuff that I've just mentioned, and was approved at that time, and it's been built accordingly. So that's basically the long story, and I'm sorry I took so much time. Any questions?
So, yeah, just to add on to that, my view is that the subregs can be waived. The Planning Commission has the authority to do so. Like I said, I think all these discussions and agreements happen, but Planning Commission was supposed to formally waive that one side of the sidewalk. I think it was probably planning to be done when we collected the bond back in November of 2022. It was my second week on the job. I did not do so. I didn't know the history of this property, so that's essentially why I'm bringing it to you all now. I don't want to go back on what I believe was agreed upon and approved by Planning Commission back in 2022 under the previous director, but I do think we need to formally have you all waive that one side.
And it's being built with one sidewalk, or that's,
Yes, for this section.
for
Yeah.
this section? Yeah, that's what
yeah.
we refer to.
Yeah, for
both
both sections, but
Okay.
we're just holding the bond for this.
Just the bond is
Phase
only
two,
for this
section
one
two.
section.
Yep. Yep. As for the reduction, it pretty much is built out. Curb and gutters are installed. Utilities are largely complete. They just said, Marshall said that they have to submit availability expectations to finish out the meters, but the utilities have been installed, the sidewalks have been installed. At this point, hydrants, everything. So with their cost estimate, they were actually down to 20,000. We're holding 70 because we don't allow it to be reduced beyond 20%. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Do we have a motion to,
I have a question. Mr. Galloway, what are the widths of the road back there? Are they up to standard? I know some of the roads they were questioning, the streets were not wide enough.
They're-
Are we dealing
okay.
with that back there?
That's been resolved with the City of Junction, and they have accepted those roads for public maintenance. But to answer your question, the difference, there again, that section was built without any standards. What it was done, the street was 1 foot narrower and the curb and gutters was 1 foot wider. So from curb to curb, the streets are exactly the same, if that answers your question.
It does.
do we have a motion then to accept this?
I will try a motion. I guess I would make a motion that the planning commission waive the requirement on Shelby Green Phase 2, Section 2, of having sidewalks on both sides of the street, to where we'd only require sidewalks on one side of the street. And then in addition to that, we would go ahead and approve reducing the letter of credit from $369,900 to $73,980.
Do we also need included in the motion, having sidewalk down one side of section 1 of Shelby Green?
I don't know that we need to do that because they were not in planning commission when that was done.
And-
So we wouldn't have any authority over what was built. That's my view of it.
And the
Henry, I don't know
paperwork,
if
the
you have a
paperwork you
different-
got listed here is very specific to section 2.
Yeah.
It's not section 1.
Is it necessary to add a stipulation that we do so with the recognition that this was a one-time issue in a community that was not part of the Planning and Zoning Commission at the time, and you know, doesn't bind us in the future from doing the same thing to other people that, you know, you know what I'm getting at, Henry?
Mr. Manning, I think that's a reasonable justification in addition. That,
Yeah, so did somebody want to restate it then?
No.
we're making this motion and this waiver in recognition that it was a unique situation where a community went out of and came back into planning and zoning, additionally at a time when subdivision regulations were being revised, and thus this is not indicating a future policy of this planning commission.
Okay, I'll modify my motion to include that.
Do we have a second for the motion or further
I
discussion?
second.
Second the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, do we want to move on to subdivision approvals then?
Yes, BBM Ventures has withdrawn their application, so we can move on to public hearings.
Okay. Well, then we'll go out of the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and go to a public hearing. And the public is free to, if we come to each item, to come to the microphone, state your name and address, and offer any opinion you have about it. So, first one on our list is Deepak Patel. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yep, Deepak Patel for Sky Touch Hospitality, aka Shri Sai, has applied for a site plan amendment for a new 91-room hotel, along with related landscaping, utility requirements, and parking requirements on 1.29 acres, zoned highway business and located at 3663 South Danville Bypass. So this property is here. It's next to the Super 8. It's this vacant lot. They've been tabled for quite a while, so we're finally ready to bring this plan forward. They did make some slight corrections to their site plan from what you all have in front of you. That's on the screen, but it wasn't any major changes, so I didn't hand out new copies. But as far as parking requirements, setbacks, use, etc., this site plan is meeting our requirements. They did institute a shared parking agreement with the Super 8 here, so they are going to be adding some additional VUA area here to account for the additional parking spaces needed. We would require 99 spaces typically for a hotel of this size. They are showing 106. They included some reinforced grass area here in the back to meet what the fire marshal requested for 360-degree access. Trying to think if there's anything else worth noting on this. Is there any questions on this portion? I will jump over to the landscaping because there's some items that we have to discuss on that. No? All right. For the landscaping, they are requesting 2 variances that have to go through the Board of Adjustment. We were unable to hear that at the June 16th meeting, so we will have to hear this at, or sorry, June 18th meeting, so we will have to hear this at the July 16th meeting. So any approvals, if it's the planning commission's intention to do so, would require basically a condition that the variances are approved. The two that they're requesting is that they're not showing a 10-foot buffer here with shrubs and trees that are needed for this VUA along the public right-of-way, and then they are reducing that 10-foot requirement. They're asking to reduce that 10-foot requirement here. This obviously would affect the parking if this variance here is not approved, probably here as well. It would change the
Director,
design of the site.
I'm having troubles tracking you for a minute there. Your pointer, I lost it.
Oh, okay, I
turned my head.
apologize. So there's VUA here, and this abuts the South Danville bypass.
Right.
So typically, we require essentially an average width of 10 feet along any VUA that's adjoining a public right-of-way. So they are asking to reduce that. I think it's shown to be about an average of 3 feet here.
Yeah, it is. It is very close.
It's very close. Obviously, the right-of-way for the bypass is pretty significant, so it's not actually all that close to the pavement, but it's very close to the right-of-way. And then the same for here. They would be required again to show that 10-foot average width with shrubs and a tree. They are asking for both of those to be waived. If they are required to add that additional feet there, it's obviously going to change the design of the parking lot. They can afford to lose up to 8 spaces, which is the number of spaces here. But, until the variance is approved, it's hard to say for sure how the parking design and layout will go. So, Henry and I talked about it. We do feel that you all can conditionally approve it. If the variance isn't approved and the site were to change significantly, we'd probably bring it back through planning commission. If the variance is approved, then you'll pretty much be seeing the site layout as shown, so.
So if we do a conditional approval today with, and it's not accepted as a variance in the Board of Adjustments, it's coming back, right?
It would most likely be coming back because they would have to potentially change the layout of the
Yes.
parking pretty
Okay.
significantly. If the only result of the variance is that they end up removing these 8 spaces here, I might not bring it back because it'd still be meeting our requirements unless you all want me to. But if the layout were to change more significantly, then I would bring it back.
And over on the main highway on the left side is, that's what the variance is going to be discussing that too also?
It's the two,
The two combined?
the
Okay.
two, yep. Everything else is meeting our requirements.
That buffer on the highway side, I guess that's put in there for the right-of-way in case the pavement is closed, right?
Yep. The bypass would have to expand pretty
Right, but
significantly for that pavement to be closed, but yes.
It's nowhere near really
That's my point,
the
is that
road.
that's done, that's a prudential measure put in there. And then we have that, point being that if we approve this, it's really unlikely that the bypass would spread that many, that they would widen the bypass, that it would get into that.
Yep.
Into that zone.
Yep, there's a natural berm there, so,
Right, there's a natural berm there.
this screening that they would be installing probably isn't gonna provide that much additional softening from the VUA that's out there, but, currently the way our regs are written is that's to Board of Adjustments discretion,
Right.
whether to grant that or not, so.
Okay.
Any more questions?
What is the ramification of waiting until Board of Adjustments approved and
I mean, you all have the right to do so. We would just have to table it for another month. I don't know if the applicant wants to speak on that at all, or no. So it's to your all's discretion.
Meaning it's gonna go to BOA, no matter what we do, right? I
Right.
like your question there, Sally.
It would cause about a 2-week delay, though, after the BOA to
Yep,
come
it-
back to us
it-
for approval.
I believe the intent is to have it heard on the July 16th BOA meeting, so this would be on the regular July Planning Commission meeting. So about 2 weeks after.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Is there anything else you need to review, Michaela, on any of the, is there anything else you need to review with us beyond landscaping?
No,
Okay.
nope, I won't go through utilities and all that,
All right.
so.
I'll move that we conditionally accept pending BOA review. Is that what we're proposing?
Yeah.
second.
And did we officially have this on the table, so do we have to move, to take this off the table and then?
I re-advertised this application because when I originally put out an advertisement, it was for 2 structures. So I did put out a new advertisement in the paper, so I'm not sure if we have to do that or not. I didn't require a new application or fee, so maybe Henry should answer this.
I think that this matter has been introduced by the chair and staff, and I don't think that our bylaws tie us so tightly to Robert's rules that we would need that motion.
Good, thanks.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Are you seconding or more discussion?
Sally
I
Sally,
seconded.
sorry.
yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. So is the next one a zoning map amendment?
It's a future land use map amendment. Would you like me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Danville Host LLC has applied for a future land use map amendment from low-density residential, medium-density residential, and commercial to low-density residential on 56.884 acres of land in 2 tracts located near the intersection of the South Danville Bypass and Ghost Pike. So this is not for the zoning map amendment, it's for the future land use map amendment. This is a requirement of our current comprehensive plan that if a site is not fully in compliance or not meeting one of the exceptions outlined, which this is not, that it needs to go through that future land use map amendment. This is, and I apologize for my drawing, that's not a perfect depiction of where the site is located, but this just gives you a general idea of the majority of the property, the 55 acres that we're talking about here, is in the low-density residential. That's that lighter yellow. This brown, tan color here is moderate density residential, and then this pink section here is highway business, commercial. I apologize, commercial. So we do have the 3 different types of future land uses shown within this property. I believe my understanding or guess of the intention of the comprehensive plan was that it was trying to create that transition from the bypass of commercial to a slightly higher density residential and then to lower density residential in the back. And because there is some commercial development along here, along Shannon Way, they were trying to keep that transition zone with that higher density residential. The way our future land uses are written, the R1C zoning district, which is what they're gonna be requesting in the next hearing, does fit within the low density residential and the moderate density residential. I asked them to go through the future land use map amendment because at the density that they're proposing, it really meets the low density residential, so I feel that's the more appropriate future land use map designation for this. You can see on the slide here, these are some of the findings that we require to look at. So basically, is the proposed use clearly compatible with the surrounding development? I would say that it's pretty compatible with what the comprehensive plan was already showing, with, this area being intended for low-density residential, which is the majority of the site. The areas to the south of that is also being shown as low-density residential. It's currently farmland, but that's what the comprehensive plan is showing as a future use. So I do feel that the future land use map amendment is compatible and is in agreement with the comprehensive plan. It's just, we're basically, if the planning commission were to approve it, we'd kind of be removing that transition area here with that commercial and moderate density residential. I should mention that these two strips basically have come through for separate zoning map amendment requests and have been approved. So this is all highway business, commercial up at the north along the bypass, and this is RM3 and RM4 respectively, which is two of our multifamily residential zoning districts. So the development the requests of this property have been following what the comprehensive plan has been outlining for it, and I do think that this additional 55 acres is showing that too. So, are there any questions for me on that?
So really on the left where the mouse is now roughly is what you're talking about, not the bright yellow, but the kind of
Yep.
brownish, yeah.
Right here. Yeah, and I might have been a little generous on this. I think it's actually following.
It's down in there.
Yep, it's really just this corner here.
It's just that corner on the left is what
Yeah.
we're looking at, okay.
Yep.
And so that's a small portion of the total, Michaela, the 55 acres that we're
It
talking
is.
about, right?
Yep, I didn't get the actual acreage on it, but my guess would be at least 90% of the property is showing as low-density
So,
residential.
yeah, so 90% would be consistent with what future land use map is today.
Yep,
And we're just modifying to capture that little piece.
yep. And our comprehensive plan has a cutout if there's two future land use map designations, they just cap it at 10 acres. Because this property is 55 acres, that's why it's required to go through the Flume Amendment.
Okay.
So,
Michaela, or to the applicant, is there any reason to think that the development that will come of this will exceed the capacity of infrastructure and public utilities or facilities around there?
no, they're installing a new sewer line, a new trunk line that's gonna be running. I think we'll probably talk about this more during the zone change application, but there is gonna be a new trunk line that's being installed there. And they have been working with utilities from the get-go for this entire property. Because these are just two tracks, they've just kind of, we have some split zoning on the property as a whole currently, but.
Any more questions? Do we have a motion?
I think you have to open it up to,
Oh, that's
Discussion.
right.
yeah.
Comment.
I'm guessing Nathan will want to speak, so.
See what they say.
Does anybody else wish to speak for or against it? Would you introduce yourself
Yeah.
and whether you're for or against it?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nathan Billings. I'm with Billings Law Firm in Lexington, Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, Mr. Smith, Ms. Gary, thank you for having us down here today. This is the first and probably easiest step of seeking a rezoning of the property, which will be the subject of the next public hearing. And before we filed this in a pre-application conference with Ms. Gary, it was discussed that in the area, she sort of highlighted here, the property, which is actually, this is actually two parent tracts, is an old farm here and a farm here. And what we're looking to do is there's a pipeline that runs right across here with a significant easement. And through the land use map, it just happens that the western corner of the combined acreage is medium density residential and has a small sliver of commercial. And so there was at least two different ways we could have approached the potential zone change. And in talking with Ms. Gary, and we agree that it is better to actually go through the future land use map amendment process and basically downzone, which is unusual, the slight acreage to the west here, which is the medium-density residential and the commercial. And instead of having a line that would have somewhat single-family residential and medium-density, we thought it was best let's just do the whole thing, single-family or low-density residential, because it makes it simpler than having some line that sort of cuts across the middle of it that somebody in the future could come back and say, well, we could do apartments or townhouses. So the way I look at this is it's probably more of a technical cleanup, which doesn't in any way imply anything with respect to the zone change we're going to hear later this morning, but just tries to update the future land use map for the consistency of a single parcel of property. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So is the intent of the development still to maintain the original intent to go from highway business to multifamily to single family?
Yes, sir. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but specifically, we have been involved in part of this process, and Mr. Kendall Wise with Vantage Engineering is here with me today, and he's been involved in a number of these. You may recall over time, there's been a number of parcels along here that have been rezoned and development plans approved on a parcel-by-parcel basis over the last, probably 20 years, I think. And I think there was a disfavor for looking at parcel-by-parcel rezoning development plans. And so a couple of years ago, my firm came in and helped Mr. Pfaff and Danville-Host do a zone change where the remnant of the property along the bypass was rezoned for commercial highway business with a development concept plan. And the western portion of the medium density was RM4, and we rezoned the eastern portion to RM3. With the understanding we would come back at some point for this area. We are not in any way seeking to change the commercial area or the medium density residential area. In fact, what we think this does is follows the comprehensive plan, because it has this step down approach that you have the bypass, you have commercial, you have medium density residential, you have low density residential, and of course the farm to the south is still an operating farm, and it helps continue to respect that farm because it's still an operating farm, that it continues to have single family, low density residential abut it. Although that farm is also slated for future land use map as low density residential.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a proposed motion that staff has made, and I have also a draft motion. May I circulate it around to the commission for this?
Yes, you can circulate it.
It's very simple. It just says, for the reasons stated in the justification letter, which is part of the file in this case, the staff report and the hearing today, and the requested low-density residential land use designation is in agreement with the comprehensive plan. And for the reasons stated in the letter, the staff report and the hearing, the low-density residential land use designation is clearly compatible with the existing and proposed surrounding development. And staff's report notes specifically that, if I can tie to it, that the application meets the directive to amend a future land use map as outlined in Chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan. With that, I would respectfully ask for your support at time of a motion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Henry, do you already have this, or is this new to you?
I do, and I think the only thing I'd add is what Michaela pointed out, that new infrastructures to be installed to accommodate the development. I think that speaks to one of the criteria in our comp plan.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I propose that we leave the public hearing and go back to a regular zoning meeting and entertain motions on the two Danville-Host plans, and then return to public hearing after that. Is that all right with everybody?
Perhaps I missed it. Did we open up to other public comment on the land use map amendment?
No, I'm sorry, we haven't. Does anybody have other comments, either for or against? Then let's move from the public hearing back to the regular zoning, planning and zoning meeting. Do we have any further discussion in the planning and zoning meeting about this? Or Does somebody have a motion to make?
As proposed, I see the stub streets. I see one stub street to the south.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about the concept plan in the zoning
the
map
next one.
amendment.
Next one?
request. Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody wish to make a motion either for or against changing the flume then?
Did we close out the public part of it?
We did.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we accept it. With,
Henry's
yes,
amended wording.
with the admit.
Yes.
Henry, are you prepared to kind of give an overview of that wording again?
I think that my suggestion would be to use the applicant's submitted motion, adding only that new infrastructure will be installed to accommodate the development.
And about toward the end where you use the word clearly compatible, is that acceptable?
That's one of the three criteria that we're allowed to use, and I think that's the one that they've
I think that's an
pointed to.
important statement, I'm just pointing out, that's, okay. I'd like to include that as my motion, those comments on this.
Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor, show sign of hands. Motion carries. Staying in the regular planning and zoning meeting and moving on to the zoning map amendment. Have any further discussion of it? Do you want to make a presentation on it?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to present the zoning map amendment first?
Okay.
Okay. So Danville Host LLC has applied for a zoning map amendment from agricultural to single-family residential R1C on 56.884 acres of land in 2 tracts located near the intersection of the South Danville Bypass and Ghost Pike. So this is the same property that we were discussing in the previous application. So I won't go through too much of the aerial here. I just did want to point out where those 2 gas line easements are, and then there's an additional gas line easement here, so you can kind of see where they're located on the aerial imagery. And then this is a picture of the zoning. Sorry, that's a little bit hard to see, but this pink purplish here is where the highway business is. The RM4 is the blue here. The tan is the RM3 as discussed. And then this is the remainder of the property. This is what we're considering today. And it's currently zoned agricultural, and they're looking to go to R1C, one of our single-family residential zoning districts.
Clearance around the gas line, is that 30 feet, or I gotta remember what, I can't put anything on?
I think it's about 100 feet.
100 feet, yeah.
Yep. I'm
Forgive
not
me,
sure
I
if
hadn't gone
it's
back through the history.
shown.
So the 2 lines end up taking a lot of space.
They do. There's certainly some challenges on this site as far as topography is concerned and the gas line easements. That's why you're seeing a little bit less density than what would typically be allowed for the R1C as part of their conditions of the zone change, which Nathan will go through, I'm sure. They're proposing to cap it at 110 units. In the concept plan that they submitted, they were showing 104. So that's what you can see on the screen here, and I did hand that out to you. They submitted some additional drawings initially that didn't have a preliminary lot layout. This is just a concept plan, so they don't want to be held to it because it hasn't been engineered, and this is a tricky site
Oh, yeah.
with a stream running through it, the topography, the easements, the new trunk sewer that's going through that you can see on the concept plan here. So it's really just to give you a little bit of an idea of the connectivity and what the density would look like. So we would require a connection here over to Shannon Way. So this would essentially provide a connection through the whole site, and then they are showing an access onto Ghost Pike here. As part of the initial zone change of the northern portion of the property, Planning Commission did require an access to Ghost Pike for that portion. So we would be looking at 2 separate entrances onto Ghost Pike. There's an existing cutout off South Danville bypass that they would connect into, and then to these existing streets here off of Shannon Way. So let me pull back my staff report here unless there's any questions on the concept plan.
And you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of contour in that ground area that makes these a little bit, if you can visualize it, it helps explain why it's in this particular shape.
Yeah,
And
and there's a pretty large pond in here somewhere, that's on the site, and.
Is that a pond that's going to be stuck around? I'm getting ahead maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
recall.
That's not part of the 56 acres that
it's
we're
not-
considering today,
okay.
but, yeah. So when you're looking at the comprehensive plan, it essentially tells you to look at two things. When you're considering residential development within Danville, the first is a future land use map, which we just had the discussion on. Most of it was shown as low-density residential. Planning Commission just effectively made the entire 56 acres as low-density residential. So I do feel that the request is meeting the future land use map. The other aspect that we're supposed to look at with residential development within Danville is these residential development guidelines. I didn't put all of them up there because it's a little bit overwhelming. They are all in the staff report, but some of them are just not applicable for low-density residential development. So the first is that a detailed traffic impact study performed by a certified traffic engineer must be submitted on any residential development. We typically have the cutoff at 50 units, so this does exceed it. We have language in our ordinance that basically puts it in the hands of the city engineer whether to waive that requirement or not. He waived it for the zoning map amendment request and has asked that essentially a traffic impact study and a traffic review of the site as a whole, so looking at flow, connectivity, everything would be reviewed at the time of submittals of preliminary plat, site plans, prior to construction plan approval. So traffic will be looked at. He just waived it for this portion of it for the zone change. Residential development should not exceed the density of immediately adjacent developments by more than 50%. This one was a little bit tricky. I know we've seen this in the past with some of our previous zone change applications where it's next to existing single-family residential developments. Obviously, to the north, they've already approved that multifamily residential, so that density can be significantly higher than 50%, particularly in the RM4. It can host, apartments and things like that. To the south is undeveloped agricultural land, so it's obviously exceeding that 50%. I think the intent really is just if you're looking at an existing neighborhood development with most of this area being newer development that we're looking at, and the comp plan showing that area to the south, those existing farms as being low density residential. I don't feel when it's all said and done that it'd be exceeding that 50%, but that's just something that the Planning Commission is going to have to consider as part of this review. And residential development should be discouraged on lands with greater than 12% slopes. I do not know what the actual percentage of the slopes is on this site, but there are certainly topographical challenges on the subject area that are going to limit the density of development. I think you're seeing that with the number of units that they're proposing. When you're looking at about 100 units within 55 acres, they're at about a half acre per unit, whereas in the R1C, we do allow 1 unit per 5,000 square feet. So they're significantly under the density that would typically be allowed for the R1C. So I think that topographical area is certainly impacting that, along with the easements and things of that nature. But are there any questions for me on that? No? All right. And then just a reminder of, the findings that we're looking at with a zoning map amendment. It either needs to be in agreement with the comprehensive plan. If it's absence of such finding, you need to find that the original zoning classification is inappropriate and that the proposed zoning is appropriate. I don't believe this would be applicable in this case, or that there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within the area. involved, which were not anticipated in the adopted comprehensive plan. I don't feel that this would be applicable for this application either, so I really think you're considering whether you feel this application is in agreement with the comprehensive plan or not. Yep. All right, that's all I had unless there's any questions for me.
Okay, so that ends the staff presentation for the planning meeting, and we'll move to a public hearing on the zoning map amendment. And do we have somebody that would like to speak for it?
Do you need the plan?
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Nathan Billings, Billings Law Firm. I think I forgot to give my address the first time. It's 145 Constitution Street in Lexington. It's my pleasure to represent Danville Host and Ron Pfaff today with respect to this zone change request. On behalf of Danville Host, we are asking for a rezoning of property in the total acreage of 56.884 acres that is currently zoned AG or Ag to R1A. We submit that it is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, not only the future land use map as amended by this commission earlier today, but also the other requirements of the comprehensive plan for the reasons that staff has already set forth for you. For the record today, I'd like to submit into the record our application, our justification letter and attachments, evidence of notice of the hearing today, both by mail from staff and the signage on the property, the staff report, as well as a June 11th letter from Vantage Engineering from Kendall Wise, who's with me here today, to the city engineer regarding the traffic study. We are in agreement with the staff report and the staff recommendations. Specifically, we believe that the zone change is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, is the justification for the zone change. So let's see if I can, let's go back with Michaela.
Yep.
There we go. So I want to come back to the map. We've sort of talked about this, the future land use map a minute ago, but you see the property to the north has already been rezoned to commercial. The RM3 is on the eastern side of the farm, and you'll see while the property itself is sort of two parent tracts, this is the common dividing line. RM4 is to the west, and then this tract down here is the 56.884 acres combined. There's already a stub road that's proposed here to cross the pipeline. You can see from the aerial view, there's a significant, I believe it's 100-foot wide gas pipeline easement there. And as you can imagine, crossing a pipeline already has some challenges with it. You'll see in the center, Mr. Collier asked a question about the water quality feature. This is a water quality feature that serves all of the properties to the north here that drain into that, both as a water detention and water quality feature, and the intent is it would continue to be maintained as such to support those properties. The residential areas down here are going to flow a different direction, so they probably won't be served by this, but this would not be affected by our zone change or the proposed development of the residential area. You'll see from a site, this sort of drains down into a creek line here, and you all probably have lots more information and knowledge than I do about the public sanitary sewer project, which is following, I got to get this exactly correct, but basically in the southeastern direction of the property, sort of similar to this creek line is wet way that the city can install gravity flow sewers. Currently, there are, I believe, 2 pump stations that serve the commercial lots up here. The owner, Danville Hosts, operates and maintains those pump stations currently, and at the time that public sanitary sewer comes online, those will be taken off and all of the properties here will be installed over to the public sanitary sewer. The intent is for the single-family housing here, we would not build them until we have access to the public sanitary sewer. We would not put a pump station in for 6 months or something. We would wait until that is done. There is a steep slope in here, and I don't know the actual percentage of it. You'll see in a second in a concept plan how we are proposing at an early stage to address it, but we are very mindful that building in the area of this steep slope is not only not advisable, it's probably just simply not doable because of the steep slopes there, because of the creek line, the drainage basin, and there will also be a sanitary sewer easement that will come up through the property from the southeast corner, sort of running in a northerly direction to connect up into the commercial property and go on through. So that's sort of a generic overview of the topography of the property. Currently, the reason we have a zone change for you on this is because the property is under contract with the Brown family, who is a single family and commercial builder out of Louisville, Kentucky. This isn't a conceptual zone change. This is because we have a purchase agreement there in due diligence. They've completed title on the property. They're engaged in their geotechnical analysis right now. And they have engaged Kendall Wise and Vantage with the concept planning for the property. So the concept plan we're presenting today, we know won't be the final one, but we also know it's important to you all to see a potential, or what I would say is, it gets to 75 or 80% along the way to where we're proposing. You'll see here in the concept plan a couple of things. Again, this is not a development plan or construction plans, but the steep slope area is, I blocked myself there, is in this area here. You'll see there's already some weird lots, like these pie-shaped lots. You'll see these weird lots. We've drawn them in there just because we don't know. In one version of this, we just had this whited out that said future development. And we said, well, we could do that, but let's try to at least put something on paper. You'll also notice there's a roadway that goes across here. There are a couple of issues with that we don't know today. One is, can we actually put in drain tiles and fill over top of that to build a roadway there, or build a bridge, which is probably cost prohibitive? And if you build a road, what are the slopes of the road, and is that prohibitive that we can't actually engineer the correct roads there? So it is possible, but I don't know, that we would have actually a cul-de-sac here, and we may have a cul-de-sac here at some point, just because we don't want to invade those steep slopes areas. I'm just trying to be transparent with you all. We've done this because we don't know. We believe that connectivity is a principle that the comprehensive plan generally likes, so we've tried to show that, including you'll see the connection to the property to the south with a stub that would not be built out other than to the property line. But this is shown connectivity today for concept purposes, not because we're asking for construction plans on this. You'll also note that in the proposed conditions, I will circulate it and go through in a minute, we are asking for a density cap of 110 on the property. I don't think there's any conceivable way we can ever get to 110. I think this shows about 105, and I think here in the middle, we're going to lose basically those lots. We have the purchase agreement that we have does have a condition of approval that we have to have a certain number of lots, or sorry, that the buyer has to be able to get a certain number of lots from the property, which we understand, and so we're trying to accommodate that request. It's not 110, it's less than that. But at the same time, we're trying to accommodate his request, and at the same time, we don't want to say it's, I don't want to say a number, but less than 110, and it's some reason we can't get there. So that's why we're asking for the 110. As staff has said, and we agree, we don't think we can ever actually build 110 on here. You also see the connectivity over here to Ghost Pike. I'm sure that's going to be part of the discussion today during the public hearing and probably comments and questions from you all. Some of you may recall, and Zach Cato with my firm was here a couple of years ago when the northern property was rezoned to highway commercial or highway business in the RM3 area, that the stub here to Ghost Pike as proposed was asked for by planning staff and engineering at that time. We actually had originally proposed another cul-de-sac ending for the commercial lots here and not extending it out. I think from those discussions, it came out that connectivity in this northern area is better than a cul-de-sac in that area, so we added it in based upon that feedback in those directions. Currently, there is a Kentucky Transportation Cabinet traffic study going on, which includes in part the intersection of the bypass and Ghost Pike. I don't know when that will be completed, but Mr. Wise can give more information on that if you'd like. Based upon that current traffic study, my understanding is that Mr. Morgan has waived the requirement for a traffic study for the zone change with the condition that before any construction plans are approved, the traffic study will be reevaluated. And one of the reasons is I believe that the Transportation Cabinet is looking at improvements of this intersection, but does not have any final conclusions yet. I understand that they are considering a lighted intersection, and they are considering a roundabout or potentially other solutions, but no conclusions have been made yet. And So until that is done, any traffic study might be preliminary and would not really give us a lot of insight. And we agree with Mr. Morgan that at the time of development plan and construction plans, whatever you all require for the traffic study would then be conducted and evaluated before approval of the plan. That's a condition we've agreed to in the proposed conditions I'll show you. I talked briefly in the other hearing on the future land use map, but one of the goals of the comprehensive plan is also to step down density. And so for this hearing, I want it to be in the record that the highway business zone is along the bypass. We step down into a medium density residential zone, and then we would step down into a single family zone. The farm to the south, future land use map designation is also single family residential. And so that would be in conformity with the comprehensive plan. On page 4 of the staff report, and Michaela had actually put these in the slide already, there are about 7 or 8 bullet points that staff has highlighted in italics. I can go through them if you'd like me to reiterate them again. She's actually stated a couple of them better than we had done in our justification letter. We're in agreement with those proposed findings, including that there are topographical challenges that we will have to address at the time of development plan, and development in that area that has certain slopes will have to be addressed at construction plan. We believe that the density of immediately adjacent development should not be exceeded by more than 50%. Is satisfied based on the current and future land use map designations, and we already addressed the traffic study. We also agree that residential development, this is the 3rd bullet point that's not on the screen, should have street lights, sidewalks, curbs, gutters that are installed at the time of development, including utilities should be underground. We agree with those as well, and that's in the 3rd bullet point. And we also agree there are 3, I believe, comprehensive plan items that she believes is not applicable to this development, which includes that residential neighborhoods should be protected from adverse impacts of proposed development, and land use changes because there's no immediately adjacent residential subdivision. That is not applicable. It says high-density residential development should be located where there's a major access point, and so we don't have high-density residential. And high-density residential should only be allowed where such development can be connected to the municipal sewer system. Why this isn't high-density, again, I've explained, because of the current public sanitary sewer project that's going to connect to the southeast of the property, which is shown actually on this drawing here in this bottom corner. That will be the requirement of the developer to actually connect into that rather than using pump stations. With that, we have several conditions that we have talked with staff, and we would suggest that the Planning Commission adopt as part of its findings today. And I'll review those briefly and then pass a proposed motion around, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The first one is a condition that the property will be developed with sufficient water supply and fire hydrants to meet the fire control standards of the city of Danville. Number 2, improvements on the property will be connected to public sanitary sewer. Number 3, all utility lines shall be located underground. Number 4, the property will be developed with an overall maximum density of 110 residential units unless additional units are first approved by you all, which I don't think is going to happen. Number 5 is that we shall coordinate with Kentucky Transportation Cabinet regarding the current traffic studies ongoing on the US 150 bypass and Ghost Pike intersection. And planning staff, city engineer may require applicant owner to conduct additional traffic study at the time of construction plan submittal and before approval of same. We have a 6th condition that you'll see in the motion. I've talked with Ms. Gary today. So the way it's typed here is I'd like to actually change that slightly, and that's concerning manufactured residential housing. We had initially talked about capping manufactured housing on here at 10%, and talking through the purchaser of the property, who will actually be the ultimate developer, and with Ms. Gary, the developer tells me that he sometimes uses what are called cross-mod or modular housing, which is not manufactured housing. So I'm not a builder, I do land use, so they're related, but I don't know all the specifics. You sort of have mobile homes, which existed until 1978 or so under federal law. You have modular homes, which are essentially like new mobile homes, but they're on trailers and axles that you move and set on block foundations. And then you have modular homes, which are sometimes prefabricated in parts or in whole, moved to a site and set on either concrete or block foundations. And there's apparently a designation of certain types of modular housing by HUD as manufactured housing, and I don't know technically the difference today. And so I've asked Ms. Gary if she would be in support of saying that, with respect to manufactured housing, that we would address a cap on manufactured housing at the time of the development plan. Because if there's and this is just where, I don't know where the line is between what I would call is a modular house that looks like has a pitched roof, it has a front porch that's added on, it looks like it's a stick-built home, but HUD actually classifies it as a manufactured housing for some reason. I don't know enough information about what might be proposed, and so what we've talked with the developer, and he says he's okay with this, and I'll let Ms. Gary speak for staff's recommendation or not of this, is to say, let's make that a condition for the development plan as well, which means, again, nothing gets installed until you all and staff review and approve that. So that sixth condition would be that manufactured residential housing shall be addressed at the development plan stage.
Yeah, just quickly to jump in on that, manufactured housing is allowed in the R1C zoning district, but not our other single-family residential zoning districts. Modular housing is allowed in all of our residential zoning districts, so that's the difference in our zoning ordinance. With the way housing is done now, it's very difficult to delineate between the two. So that's essentially why we're going to table this until such time if the planning commission wants to see a cap on that. But
Yeah, there's some high-end housing that's being made in factories right now and then
Yep.
shipped, you know.
Or pieces made in factories
Pieces,
and
right.
shipped.
Yep.
It's what one reference is called pro-modular or cross-modular. But because the HUD designates things a certain way, and I don't know all the technical way HUD does things, I just know the products that our developer, our buyer, saying he uses, which is they're pre-manufactured pieces. I'm concerned that if we say 10% cap on manufactured housing, which we had originally discussed with staff, that will be an impediment, and that we understand you should want to make sure you're comfortable with whatever he's going to install. And so my suggestion is let's make that a condition of approval, that the development plan is conditioned upon that. So again, you all have the final say and control over what would be done.
Yep.
I know, finally, I think that there's a number of members of the public here today, and I assume some of them are here from Ghost Pike. I know at the prior zone change that a number of them were here. I think that we are very sensitive to the fact that there are farms and other tracks, other housing on Ghost Pike. And our intent is not to add a bunch of traffic to Ghost Pike that will impact them negatively. We have been sensitive to that, and we remain sensitive to that. The area in the southeastern corner, it is a possibility to connect another roadway over the pipeline here. And it may be that is a solution long term. We know we have to access it on the western side because there's already a stub there. We know that the approvals to build the road across the pipeline are incredibly complicated, and the construction is incredibly complicated. And to the extent we can avoid additional construction across that pipeline, we want to do so. We also know there may need to be improvements along Ghost Pike at some point that need to be made. It's just that until we have the final development plan and know how many houses would actually access across here, we don't know that answer today. And I don't think we're required to know it for the zone change. But we certainly need to know it for the development plan and construction plans. And so we are very sensitive to that issue. We want to continue to be sensitive to that issue. We want to make sure it's front and center, which is why we've added as a condition of approval that issue regarding the traffic on Ghost Pike. It may be that neighbors say they want connectivity to come across here, to come over. Maybe they don't. I firmly believe that the Transportation Cabinet study will help figure out some of the traffic impediments at this intersection, and that based upon that solution, when we come with a final development plan, construction plans, Ghost Pike, that whatever's required at that time will be abundantly clear to us what needs to happen in the process. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll circulate a draft motion if I may. Just be mindful that number 6, or I should say 4F in the proposed motion would be changed to just say that manufactured housing shall be addressed at the development plan stage as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission or staff may have.
And Henry and Michaela, you have these, you've seen these before?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have them before staff packets, so they weren't included, but
Yes, so we draft them and circulate them to staff to work through them beforehand. I usually find that's more helpful than showing up with something new that no one's seen before.
And then, because it says on 4F, it says 10% today. That's what you were talking about.
Yes, sir. 4F is the one I was talking about, that we had talked through 10% and talking to the buyer. He said, well, there's this modular product that HUD stamps as manufactured housing. Could we say, just like we did the traffic study, let's address this at the development plan stage? I said I would talk with Ms. Gary. I think she says that's appropriate. And that way you all still have the final say on it. So it's moving the decision down the road, but it's not removing the decision from the table.
Right, it's putting it at a different time interval.
That's correct. And at a time when we'll actually know with more certainty exactly how many lots, we'll know the location of the roadways. The other engineering factors will be able to be discussed in part with that so that you will have more information to make a holistic decision instead of in the abstract.
What I was thinking was along the line a little bit here. What's the impact if I don't want to do this zoning thing today?
If you mean.
Delay it until we know more information.
Well, we have, at least from the applicant standpoint, we have two decisions. One could be a denial of it if you don't believe it's in conformity with the comprehensive plan, in which case I have to wait a period of time before I can refile.
Right,
which
I
believe is a year.
understand. I was referring to tabling it and allowing it to develop.
Yeah, the second one is either a postponement or a continuance to such point in time as certain questions can be answered. And because we have a purchase agreement with the developer that requires certain timelines be met for us, one of which is a title work, one of which is geotech, one of which is zone change, one of which is the development plan. If we table the zone change, it then kicks the development plan further down the road as well.
Yes, yeah, I can understand that.
And so we would respectfully ask you all to adopt the zone change because we do believe it's in conformity with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan requirements.
I appreciate it. I was just trying to be very apparent on what we're doing.
No, I think, I think it's a very fair question. And if you all believe there's other requirements that should be addressed in the development plan that need to be a part of Section 4, we understand that, and we're respectful that all counties do things differently. Every county has its own zoning ordinance and has its own subdivision regulations and has its own bylaws. And while generally they are somewhat the same, they are all different. And you know, in Fayette County, it takes about a year to get this done. In Nicholasville and City of Jessamine, it takes a couple of months. It's just a different process. And I think different counties put more emphasis on the final development plan, which I think you all do, than other places which put more emphasis on the zone change. There's not a right or wrong. It's just KRS. Let's counties and cities that have adopted zoning to adopt different processes that they believe serve their community the best way. And so for this process, we believe that the development plan is the place where some of these other critical decisions should be made, and they need to be preserved to be made there. Because you don't want to be in a position where somebody says, why didn't you do that? And you say, oh, we didn't put that as a condition.
Yes, welcome to the world that we live. And thank you for taking and walking us through that. That's very nicely done.
Okay. I'm happy to answer any other questions from the commission. Thank you all for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have anybody else who wants to speak in favor of this zoning map change? If we don't have anybody else that wishes to speak in favor of it, do we have anybody that wishes to speak against it?
Good morning. My name's Chuck Stallard. I am a 27-year resident of Ghost Pike at 1510 Ghost Pike. And I appreciate the word sensitivity that you used in your comment from 2 years ago. The suggestion was, and I think the plan was that there would be no access roads onto Ghost Pike, that you all would have a buffer. Now we've got two proposed here. I realize this is not the development plan, and that'll have to be addressed at that time. But I do have some questions. I have some concerns about the quality of life that, that we have maintained on Ghost Pike, and the potential of adding multiple, hundreds of cars onto Ghost Pike is a big concern. I think you all realize how many accidents occur on the bypass daily, and our intersection is one of those intersections. It's 55 miles an hour down the bypass, and regularly people are running the light, and to add that many cars onto that intersection is a major concern of mine. Multiple trucks run that light, and so I just want to point that out. Also, as a resident, I'm curious about the status of the sewer line. Supposedly that was going to be installed 2 years ago. It's still not installed. That comes across family property, multiple family properties. We have 5 families, Stallard and Case families that live right there. Okay, my in-laws, my daughter, my son, my sister-in-law, we all live on Ghost Pike. And they got right-of-ways for the sewer, and we have no idea what the status of the sewer line is. We asked the sewer, or I guess it's Marshall, and they keep putting us off, saying it's going to be installed, it's going to be installed. We don't know what the status of that is. But my major concern is the amount of traffic that would go on to Ghost Pike. And I would also point out on, I'm going to call it the north piece of Ghost Pike from the bypass over to Stanford Road, is a very dangerous, heavily traveled road. There's even been a fatality on that road. There's been fatalities at our intersection, the way it's currently set up. And I just have a major concern of having 2 major entrances onto our road. Had a lot of thoughts sitting over there, and they're just kind of fleeting through there. But I mean, this is a major change. I realize that we can't stop development of this property, but I would hope that we would really take a hard look at what Ghost Pike's capabilities are, and that intersection really can handle with the current way the traffic flows up and down the bypass there at 55 miles an hour, usually at 60 or 70 miles an hour.
Do you think this traffic study condition that's being proposed and the requirement they're doing is connecting to the sanitary sewer is the right thing to do?
Well, I think a traffic study definitely needs to be done.
It'll come back here again for more conversation.
Right. When I look at this, and I realize this is not in the development phase, and I don't know all the legal wording to use, but when I first see this, I'm thinking, oh man, two entrances, 110 residents, that's over 200 cars that potentially could be going to that light every day. And that just really, really concerns me. And plus, just right across that road is family land.
Yeah,
and we farm.
Yeah, and I travel that Ghost Pike all the time to get in town. I'm out Route 52.
Yeah.
So I'm very much aware of what you're talking about on traffic patterns.
Absolutely.
But I think the traffic studies are intended to bring and highlight those issues out and come up with solutions. That's how that's intended.
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so. And so really, I guess my point is, I realize that today's motion really is about a zoning change, and that there's a development process and there's studies that have to continue to be done. But I just wanted to kind of put in your all's mind, as you all go through this process, and I don't even know what that whole process is personally, that you keep in mind that there are residents that have concerns about this development. and how it's going to impact our whole community, folks, our whole community. And so I guess that's all I really have to say.
No, thank you very much for saying.
Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak against the zoning map change?
Good morning. My name is Will Stallard. My dad just got done speaking, and I own the property directly across Ghost Pike right there. And when those two roads come out there, one will be directly across from my driveway, and the other one will be right there across from the farm.
Which one's directly across, the top one or the bottom?
I say directly across, roughly the one to the north, I think.
Okay.
I don't really know the distances on that, but, and I could hit between the two. I'm not 100% sure, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, no, this is only,
Yep.
you gotta
Yep.
come to a point, but I'm just getting a
Yeah,
feel.
my driveway's down there on, kind of on the right up there, oh, you're on that map.
Oh,
Yep,
sorry.
yep, sorry.
This one here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah.
So,
I think that first entrance is maybe
It's
up
way up
here,
there.
and then the
There
second
is-
one might be right around.
so I come out on the pipelines.
I'll be
Yeah.
curious to see
Okay.
the upper end.
Yeah, I'll come
So a
out right
little
there
south of
on
that.
that upper pipeline. But anyway, so yeah, this traffic it's one thing that, probably one of the first things that really, really worries me, and, you know, learned a couple things sitting here in this meeting today, and one of them is we made a mistake earlier when, the comprehensive plan thing was talked about, and probably should have got up and talked then and opposed that, because looks like once you got a approval for the comprehensive plan to follow that, then all of a sudden you got a little meat to go along and, change the zoning. So, I don't know. I guess I want to say thank you to Billings Law Firm, because y'all have been very forthcoming and very sensitive to where we are and where we're going, and I appreciate that. I know there's nothing I can do to stop this thing, but I am concerned about coming out on the road. I'm concerned that if you do come in there and come out on Ghost Pike and you widen the road, then all of a sudden, are you gonna take land that is my land? Are you gonna come into my field right there and widen that road? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's got an implication, when you go to roading and talk about easements and widening things, that all of a sudden we're gonna be building fences and then, we're gonna be losing agricultural land. I don't care if it's an inch, I don't wanna lose it. The other thing that's came out today that I'm really concerned about is a sale. It sounds like Danville LLC Properties is fixing to try to sell this thing. And it's theirs, they can sell it, move it as they want, but they're selling it, I'm making assumptions, I don't know the folks out of Lexington, but Louisville, the Brown family out of Louisville, don't know those people. They could be stand-up people, they may be sitting here in the audience today, and I don't know that, and that's fine. What I do know is they're not local. They're a construction company, they can come in, develop property, and go back to Louisville. I'm the one that has to sit there and deal with, whether it's HUD housing, whether it's, mansions, it doesn't matter. I have to deal with the traffic flow and the things that they've changed while they're here. And they can turn around and go home with it. So I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling. Thank you all for allowing us to come here. The other thing I did say, the construction plans. I do realize that we're talking about a zoning change in the construction plans. I would like to know how that happens, when those construction plans are approved, when they're presented, who they're presented to. I got a letter that said, hey, we're gonna rezone this thing. I didn't get a letter that said, hey, we're gonna change the zoning plans up there from what we talked about 2 years ago. Kind of left this phase and then nothing. You know, I didn't get any, notice of, hey, we're gonna change what we're doing. So I'm kinda asking how to find that out. Can somebody contact me as this thing goes forward? So, I don't know. Thank y'all for your time today.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hey, Will,
Kayla, can you
Um,
answer a little bit about when the construction plan comes back? and
I
so
can.
The timing.
So the way that it would work for the low-density residential area is that it would come through as a major subdivision plat. So it would not be considered a public hearing that I would advertise in the newspaper or put out signs or send out notices for. It's something that would come through. Planning Commission would have a hearing on it. It just wouldn't be classified as a public hearing and be subject to those notification requirements. They would come through and go through technical review, and that would get their preliminary plat approval. They would come and bring the plat to the full Planning Commission for final plat approval. And then once final plat approval, so for final plat approval, you would not get the full set of construction plans. You would get essentially the lot layout. So, it'll probably look a little bit different than this, but that would be what the final plat approval would look like. Once final plat approval is given by the Planning Commission, then that's when they would bring in construction plans for administrative review. So we typically don't bring that through the full commission. They are discussed, as you all saw, when we were doing the construction sureties. They can be discussed to an extent at that point when we're looking at cost estimates and things like that. Everything we review is public, so it's available for review. It's just not something that we bring through the full commission.
Michaela,
How do we, not, do we just need to come to every meeting, see if it shows up on the agenda? No one's gonna contact us, let us know?
Yeah, we wouldn't send out notifications for that. That's just the way our zoning ordinance is written. It could be upon the developer if they're willing to send out notifications of that type.
we could ask Mr. Billings.
Yeah, I would suggest that to help address their concerns, that we just add another condition of approval that says that and this is where terms of art are, I want to make sure that I have the right term of this. So, Ms. Gary, if you can help me. But at the time we submit that preliminary plat for approval, that public notice be given just to the same people who would receive it for the zone change. That way, they are given public notice that they would not otherwise get, and they are involved in the process. Is that the correct term?
Yeah, for the zone change, we put out a sign, we put an ad in the newspaper, and we sent out letters to adjoining property owners.
Yeah, and the cost of that to be borne by the applicant. I think that the Planning Commission could adopt that as a condition over and above what is normally required, because I want to make sure that, I'm not blowing smoke here, that they need to be involved in the process, because if they're not, it just is a bad situation. And bad situations lead to uncertainty and delay and costs, and that's not good for anybody.
But it's not opening another public hearing, right?
No, subdivision
It just
plats
makes you
for.
aware that you can come and see the presentation.
Public's still allowed to comment on the subdivision plat. It
exactly.
just isn't there are very set requirements for a public hearing
Right.
based on the state.
just
So it
getting-
wouldn't be subject to that, but obviously everyone can come and comment. It's still open to public comment. It
Right.
just,
And what I'm getting.
So someone could come to the meeting and they could publicly comment once we get to that plat approval stage.
yes.
And in the plat approval stage, would it address the traffic issues that all the folks here are concerned about?
Yep, that will be part of the technical review. It's not gonna have street profiles and designs, but at the point of when they're platting, they'll know the situation
Right.
with this area here, whether that's gonna be a cul-de-sac or not, that will have to be shown on the lot layout.
We know the part from Ghost Pike's curve to the.
Yeah, they would be showing where that entrance is.
I don't think you understand how much that affects me
Yep,
and how frustrating that is. I like Ghost Pike the way it is. I don't want it to change. I don't want this subdivision. We don't want it to change.
So could there be a condition?
I'm gonna have to ask anyone that wants to speak to go to the microphone,
Yeah, I
please,
need
so
to-
we can get it on the record.
Will, if you want to bring it back, that's right. we need to have it, it's clearer when you speak in the microphone for the history.
I apologize. I don't want Ghost Pike to change. When you leave that curve right there and you, on Ghost Pike, when you leave that curve and you go to that stoplight up there, that directly affects me. My kids are gonna be 16, 17 years old. When some of this is gonna happen, more than likely, they're gonna pull out of there right in the middle of all that traffic, out of my driveway, okay? I don't want that road widened. I thought that we had a 40 or 60-foot buffer right there that was gonna have a really nice landscape with native trees in it. I don't see that on this map. That changed from last zoning meeting to today. So I'm sorry, okay? So my family's been there over 100 years on this land. 100 years, 1922. Folks, we've been there. We're gonna stay there as long as we can. And what you're trying to do is gonna greatly change the landscape. I'm not in favor of this.
Mr. Stollard? No, it's okay. No. Listen, the people that sit on tech review, Kendall's at tech review every week, or every month.
Every month.
And Michaela's at tech review, and those of us that sit on tech review, these are exactly the kind of questions that we ask. And I think the process is extremely important to follow. This today, we're talking about issues that are obviously down the road, but I also think that they're good to bring up to remind us the kinds of things to remember when we are in tech review. I have to say that they don't need defense, but our staff doesn't need defense, but this is about the changing, making a zone change because there's a particular piece of the property that's not, there's two zones within this property. So we're talking about a zone change, not a development plan here. But this is not one of the things that we're going to look to overlook when it comes to tech review.
The conditions, when we start listing those, they become part of the requirements, and the director extremely administrating those and following those and bringing it back to the group and the committees and making it available. So, because you have concerns that we've talked about during these meetings. Sir.
Just simply as a citizen of Boyle County, I'm concerned about the transparency of the process. And I realize today is not about the actual plan. This is a conceptual idea. Right. But for a citizen to be aware of technical discussions, we need to be involved in this. We need the opportunity to voice our opinion and to give you real-life examples of how this is going to impact the life of many, or the lives of many, many people, not just Ghost Pike residents, but the people that potentially could live there. And you've got commercial properties traffic, you'll have residential property traffic coming onto that road. And we just need that transparency and we need that communication. So if some way the planning and zoning or the government, whoever that is, that as you all go through this process, that you'll involve us in these discussions. That's what we want to be a part of.
This is the place to start.
And that's what I'm asking, for you all to just consider involving us.
The public can.
Ms. Slade, if they came to Perryville and they were wanting to make a big change, you'd want to know about it, wouldn't you? And you'd like to have a voice in it. And that's all we're asking. We are asking to have a voice when they get into the development phase of this and the real life potential of two roads being a part of that development plan. We need transparency here, folks. That's it.
The public can attend the technical review meetings that we have. It's not closed to the public. You're invited. You just have.
How do we know?
It's public. It's on the website, right? When it publishes the technical review meetings.
Yeah, yeah, I usually post the agenda a week before planning commission meeting, not prior to tech review, because applications are still being finalized at that point, but I can try to start doing that. The date of the tech review is always publicized.
Yeah.
That's great. But from what I'm hearing, we can attend. But once the owners make the plat and the plan, they don't have to listen to squat we say. They can do what they want. They can listen, but they don't have to change anything, right? So, do what? Yeah, unless you all tell us to today. Okay, so that's where we're at. Is whatever you all do today will affect what they can do later. I've just learned that in the last 10 minutes. I didn't know that coming in here today. That's a big deal. To me, that's a huge deal. If I'd have known that 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, I may be at this meeting, differently. I may have been able to think about this a little bit more. But you are going to make a decision today that's going to affect us for the next 100 years. Next 100 years. It's the only opportunity I get to make sure that, this thing's wise. I had one other thought. Talking about the traffic coming from Danville on 150, coming to that stoplight. It was told in here today, and Mr. Patel might get mad at me in just a minute, and I apologize for that, but, he's trying to put those, and I see the reason why he's adding, I don't have any problem with all that going in. But we talked about the 10-foot, y'all talked about a 10-foot buffer between that parking lot and that right-of-way, and that bypass will never be widened. That comment was made over here in this area at some point today. We don't know that. We don't know that 100 years from now that bypass will never be widened. I agree, there's a great big bank and all that there, but that could affect the stoplight at Ghost Pike eventually. So we gotta think about that. I don't know. I'm sorry.
So my name's Kendall Wise, and I work for Vantage Engineering. I'm not here in opposition, but I just wanted to try to address a couple of the issues that were brought up. The question about the sanitary sewer, we've completed construction plans for the trunk sewer off-site and also north through the property. Those plans, the plans off-site, it passes through 5 or 6 neighboring properties before it connects into the Balls Branch trunk sewer located on the other side of Ghost Pike, near Balls Branch Creek. And the city has acquired off-site sewer easements and construction easements for the installation of that. The plans and the easements have been in place for over a year, I think. Marshall Carrier, the city engineers managing the project. The permits for the sewer have been acquired from the Kentucky Division of Water. I took care of that. And as far as I know, Marshall is just waiting for the right time to put a shovel in the ground and start construction. I understand that he's talked to a contractor about doing the work, so I feel like any time now, the off-site portion of the sanitary sewer will be installed, and there are 5 or 6 homes that could benefit from that sewer being installed. Other questions? I think Mr. Stallard was a bit concerned that we weren't showing any of the buffers that were discussed at a previous zone change hearing. Those buffers are still there. They were made a condition of the previous zone change, and those buffers would only apply to the property north of us. That was part of the other zone change. I know that because I was a little fuzzy on what the conditions were in the previous zone change, so I looked that up on the land use certificate that's recorded in the courthouse. And the entrance that's shown on that northern part, as well as the entrance on the southern part, those are things that the city wants us to do because they feel like it's best for the public in terms of traffic, flow, connectivity, safety, emergency services. It's not, our initial plan didn't include that. And so I just want you to know that when the city asks for something, and we're asking for approval, and the city has a large influence on what we're doing, we try to work with all parties, but the city feels like that's best for traffic flow, to have those connection points.
All right, then I think on condition, sounds like, thank you, Kendall. We need a buffer. We need a buffer on the south side. If we got a buffer on the north, you need one to match it on the south, my opinion, please. City streets, I'm gonna give you a once over on the city. City aggravates the holy living crud out of me. I'm a county. I'm in the county. I have no vote in the city. I have no representation on the city council, and the city can come do with me as they please. They can come annex my land if they want. There's nothing I can do about the city, and that is forever frustrating. Forever frustrating. So, I don't care if the city wants a street on Ghost Pike. No, the answer to me is no. Put a cul-de-sac, find a different way to come out. Thank you.
Everybody will get a chance to speak, don't worry about that, but we've been meeting an hour and 45 minutes. So I'd like to take a 5-minute break and hold it to 5 minutes for anybody that needs to answer a phone call or go to the restroom or something. So we'll reconvene 8 till. That's all right with everybody.
So my name is Joe Harlow. I currently live at 325 Twin Brook Drive. I bought a 5-acre property on Ghost Pike with intentions to build a house. Kendall had said something about the sewer, had all the easements and everything buttoned up. They were just ready to break ground. I heard from Marshall on Monday, and Marshall's told me that he's still waiting on a, let's see what's called. He's still waiting on encroachment information from the gas pipeline company to get started. I just wanted to point that out. The other thing is if we're here to do a zone change and we're talking about doing a study on the traffic afterwards, to me, that just sounds a little backwards. Why wouldn't we do the traffic study on this before we did the zone change? And I mean, I don't know how it works, but to me, that makes sense. Why would you change the zone for something that wasn't feasible if a traffic study said that it was going to be dangerous? Why wouldn't you do the traffic study first before you did the zone change? Thank you, guys.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak in opposition? Okay, come forward, please.
I'm Cindy Fry, and I live on Ghost Pike, actually next to Mr. Stallard Sr. And I don't farm. It's a blessing to live there. We've lived there 25 years. I invite any of you to come and sit on our porch for a day or two, ride up and down the road with me. You've got tractors, you've got pickup trucks, you've got hay wagons, you've got all kinds of farming equipment up and down the road all the time. We've talked mostly about the safety of the intersection on 150, but I agree with everything that's been said about the roads coming out onto Ghost Pike, especially the one in the track we're talking about, because that turn, and again, any one of you, please drive out there yourselves and look at that turn. The bank of the road where it turns there is very dangerous. You have to go slow to not go left to center. It's very difficult to see someone coming both ways because of the turn. And again, you've got lots of traffic already from those of us who live there, not to mention the farm equipment that's daily coming up around that turn, and then to put an entrance and exit there is just about as dangerous as the intersection that we've mostly focused on. So I don't want to see our landscape change either, but the biggest thing is the safety issue. And it is real and it's serious. And I'll feed you lunch, dinner, if you all want to come and experience it yourselves. But this is just a picture. It's easy to make decisions based on a picture. And I appreciate all of you listening. I appreciate your transparency on things. But as Will said, this is a big deal. And there's only a few of us here, but mostly everybody on Ghost Pike agrees with what we've said today. And we have different reasons. But if nothing else, I mean, change happens, but if nothing else, please, please, please don't let a entrance and exits go on to Ghost Pike. Thanks.
Anybody else like to speak in opposition to the zoning map change? Okay, you wish to speak again? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Nathan Billings from Billings Law Firm for the applicant for the record. During the brief break, I was talking with the Stallards regarding their comments, of which we're sensitive to all the residents' concerns about traffic on Ghost Pike. And I think that in the summary, I want to make a couple points. The first one is, and this often is the case at a zone change hearing, the development plan concerns take front and center, not an analysis about whether the proposed zone change is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, of which the future land use map is not the only criteria, but it is a criteria that is given heavy weight. And we have submitted, and the staff has recommended, that the proposed zone change is in conformity, and none of the evidence so far is against that. The question was, why does the traffic study happen later rather than now? And the traffic impact study has to be submitted for one that has more than 500 average daily trips or 100 trips an hour, and this will not generate 100 trips an hour. And it's with 110 units is right around 500, but we don't actually know that it's 500, and so it's required. But we also know that because there's other studies ongoing at the time, it makes sense to have the state transportation study done first, and it makes sense not to allow development plan or preliminary plan approval and construction plan approval until that is done. And one of the reasons is because until you actually have the proposed layout of the subdivision, you don't know exactly how many units are going to be built, how many lots are going to be proposed. We don't know whether there would be a continuous street, which is suggested, or continuity, or whether there could be a cul-de-sac off of Ghost Pike, and whether, for example, improvements along Ghost Pike could be required of the developer at the developer's expense as along the right-of-way, which means it wouldn't come into your property. There's a 40-foot right-of-way there, which is adequate to make the improvements in the existing right-of-way. But those are all questions that are development plan questions. Now, as I also told Mr. Stallard, because he said, well, Mr. Billings, we appreciate your comments, but are you going to represent the Brown family after they purchase this and develop it? I said, in fact, I hope so, because I like to do legal work. But there's no guarantee of that at this point. I said, and that's one of the reasons why we also have conditions in here regarding these things. Because Mr. Pfaff is the owner of the property to the north after he sells it to the Browns. He wants to make sure that he is able to be involved in the process as part of it. He may have financial obligations to make roadway improvements after closing, but as the owner of the property, he won't be in control of the development plan. And so not that he's in the same shoes as residents along Ghost Pike, but he's in the similar shoes that he will be a neighboring property owner, that he wants his own protections to make sure that what the Browns are proposing in the conceptual plan today is what is actually built. So this is not just for the Ghost Pike residents, although I completely believe they should continue to be involved in the process, but it's also for the current owner who will eventually divest ownership of, assume it's rezoned as parcel. In light of the comments from the neighbors about the involvement and understanding that at the preliminary plat hearing, there wouldn't be public comment, I would suggest another potential condition of approval, not just be that notification be done, but also that the applicant for that plan have a public meeting prior to submittal of the plan, so that would be, they would by that time have a traffic study done. They would have a much more detailed layout of the subdivision, which is what the traffic study will be based upon, before they file their application. And that way, there's a lot more certainty known, and the residents at that point can do things like write letters to staff or emails that can be submitted into the record that the Planning Commission can then review, even though it may not be a public hearing with comment. So there is a feedback mechanism for you all to hear those comments and receive those comments, and an accountability mechanism to make sure that the public is able to be involved as a condition of approval at the zone change. I mean, as a condition of approval at the zone change today for what will come down the pike at the development plan stage. So I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any final questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I apologize for the length of this meeting, but I think it's important. This is a complex area with the intersection there and trying to get subdivision entrances in that provide for safety. So just thank you for your patience in this going on. So anybody else wish to speak against it? All right, then we'll close the public hearing and open the planning and zoning meeting again to the...
Michaela, can you please put back that slide that has the different colors on there. One more above, the one that had like the yellow and the orange. Yeah, so if I understand correctly, the purpose of today's decision is that little left corner over there to go from buff color to yellow. Is that correct?
That's what we did in the previous hearing. We considered that tan colored portion and changed it to the light yellow. So this entire property is now showing as low-density residential. Like we discussed in the previous hearing, the majority of it for the future land use map, this was planned to be developed as such in a low-density residential manner, which is the density
Right.
that the applicant is proposing.
So the current question, Tom, is the change of zoning
That's right, to go.
from ag to R1. That's the current question. We've already dealt with that little corner.
Yeah. And, you know, as I tried to say in my staff report, really the two things that the comp plan pushes us to look at when we're considering a zoning map amendment for residential use within the city of Danville is it in compliance with the future land use map, which I think it largely was before we did the flume, and now I would say it is in compliance with the flume. And then the second portion is that residential guidance development, which is that list that I went through and Nathan went through more thoroughly. It's about 7 bullet points long when it's all said and done. I just tried to highlight the ones that maybe were, took more consideration, but those are the two major things that the comp plan tells us to look at. There's some goals and objectives and some housing numbers and things like that that you can also take into consideration that we can go into more if there's questions on it, but that's what we're looking at with the comprehensive plan.
And so we're back in the planning and zoning meeting, and yours was the first comment. Are there any more?
I'd like to explore the conversation that Mr. Billings talked about making more involvement with the traffic pattern, how that worked and how that would function with our involvement from P&Z, what we could do to facilitate something of that nature.
I don't think I understand the question.
The ideal here was talking about making the planning and zoning, the proposed traffic studies at some point in time, us making that more readily available to the various people to look at. Is that something that we can do from the P&Z perspective to make happen?
I think the applicant has agreed to send out notices and hold a community meeting prior to submitting the application, so.
Are we facilitating and leading that meeting, or is that done
So
by
for-
a different group?
For how we might address that, I think it means that we would make it conditional
We
on
can,
approval of the traffic study before we come to the plat approval, right? That's,
Yeah, essentially the way we wrote that condition is that it'd have to be approved prior to construction plan
Correct.
phase, which would come after final plat development, but I think it really will come before the final plat approval. But they, you know, with the traffic study, just with the uncertainties about that middle area with where the stream is and the sewer, it's gonna significantly impact the numbers if they show a cul-de-sac there versus a continued street that would connect into the commercial
I
area and
think
whatnot.
exactly what I was
And also,
thinking, yeah.
we don't know what that intersection's gonna look like once the state completes their study. So there's factors outside of planning commission's control. That doesn't mean that it's not gonna be required at submittal and reviewed by the city engineer, for safety and all that. It's just,
you're clearly stating that there's other people who have to do work and coordinate that and collect that information together before that can be discussed. Us at that time, Dan, is exactly what you're saying.
yeah,
We can state that it has to happen.
right, right.
And we
So,
can-
For what's in front of us today.
Yes.
We can basically decide to approve the zoning map amendment and the change with the conditions that we're talking about. The alternative for us would be to not approve, which pushes the timeline down until the traffic study was complete. I think that's
Yeah, I mean,
fair.
the city engineer waived the traffic study for the zoning map amendment. I think you all probably could still ask for it. I might leave that up to Henry, but, I still feel there's a number of factors that,
Right,
you know, even if we push the zone change, they're not gonna spend the money on engineering the site
Sure.
until they know they can
Well, and
actually develop this.
It's at the state level with the traffic study around the bypass and the Ghost Pike intersection. That's a state level, right? And that's
Yes,
whatever timeline they're on.
yes, yep. So,
And that's what I'm coming to, Dan, the same thing
Yeah,
you there. And I understand there's a state level, and the city at this point has
I'm
not.
there too. It's
But
like,
It gets into importance of the situation and how that works out. At the same time, the layout of a more refined site preliminary plan, you had it up there, and how the roads access all have to come to play. Those are all things that have to be worked on, and we'll have more time to review that and bring those and look at those.
right.
It won't just happen through the system.
Right.
That's the importance to have on here. But if you're gonna, just making sure that we can cover this.
I think
We have to do what we have to do on the zoning now to basically move this whole process along, or otherwise it's gonna sit here and stall out.
Mhm.
Either goes dead or it moves. That's basically what we're doing. There's no value to table it, no value to delay it. It has to be has to be occurred.
Yeah.
That's what it says on here. All these topics go in record in our meeting minutes and notes and history and the conditions
Right,
that we want to put on those.
exactly.
If I understand it correctly.
So what we would be doing, Dan, what you're proposing is, I think I'd be proposing the same thing, that we would approve the zone change, conditioned that and we would put a condition on the development plan down the
Yes.
road.
I think what we could do here is approve the zone change as we've kind of got in front of us, because it's consistent with
Right.
with the comprehensive plan
Correct.
and everything that we've seen. And put conditions on the communication with the adjacent landowners and a public meeting, which has been agreed to. We could make sure that we, as planning commission, advertise properly when the plat comes back to us, so that it's clearly on our agenda and is available for public comment. Those are things that we could do to help make it easier to make sure the public has input.
I think you said it very well, Dan.
All right,
I mean, there's other conditions that are listed here
yeah.
that Mr. Billings gave. But
All right. Can I make that motion?
Please.
With those conditions as stated? And,
we might wanna let Henry and
yeah,
Nathan
I'd
jump
ask
in and
Henry
clean
to
this
try
up.
to restate that in the appropriate language.
I think it's appropriate to start with Mr. Billings' proposed motion as modified, and then I want to make sure I understand what conditions you're adding. Communication with adjoiners, public meeting, and advertisement. I saw the advertisement as being the same as communication with the adjoiners, but
No, I think there's discussion about having some kind of a public meeting.
Right.
Which is not planning and zoning,
right,
but would be for the residents. And then communication of our planning and zoning meeting where we would approve the plat so that it's clear to the public that's on our agenda.
okay. So those are the two, all right.
Yeah, I think it should just be at the developer's expense. So we would essentially just charge a re-advertisement fee, I
Right.
guess.
I mean, I appreciate the public comments that sometimes it's difficult to know what's on our agenda.
I'm wondering if there's going to be, because thinking about the type of notice that we're going to give, I think Nathan had said, in the same manner as you would advertise a zone map amendment, will that create any timing problems for the plat submittal? And
Yeah, tech reviews usually on the same day as we send out the advertisement and letters and things of that nature. So if we didn't get it in a timely manner of our filing deadline, then they would just be delayed a month. So,
okay.
We also have to recognize that the city engineer probably had a really good rationale for waiving that because he knows what's going on with the state transportation study as well.
Right.
So, you know, he's not gonna make the city do something that the state is
Yeah.
already doing right now.
Right. If I were Josh, I'd say, wait, wait for the state to figure it out.
Which apparently they're doing.
Yep, they are doing a current study on it.
Right, so,
Yep.
so that's just.
And the traffic impact study isn't waived indefinitely. It's just waived for this zone change. It's gonna need to be submitted, reviewed, and complied with as part of the preliminary and final plat.
And being a county resident myself, I'm interested, you all know how interested I am in our own road, you know, where I live. You know, the state being on this right here, there's really nothing that the county and the city are going to be able to do while the state is doing their own study right now underway.
Right. All right. Henry, can you rephrase my motion properly?
Sorry, Henry, before you do that, I just want to state that even though the appearance is that not the appearance, but even though we're in compliance with the FLUM and I think all the KRSs, I'm still concerned that the actual gradient from the bypass over to the plot that we're talking about is one that looks great on paper, but in actuality, we are moving directly from the bypass to AG1 kind of area. So I don't think the gradient is reflected between the R3 and the R4 all the way
50%?
to the change. So it looks great on paper, but when we're talking about what is actually called for, I don't think that in actuality, it's just something to consider, you know, when we move to that, because it is in compliance, but the gradient and the change is very stark. I mean, I've been over on the road and just something to consider.
You mean the 50% density?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
That might be a subject for discussing what the justifications are for this and either adding a clarification or excluding that from our consideration. But in talking about a motion for approval, I think we start with what Mr. Billings has submitted, adding the conditions that the applicant or their successor shall hold a public meeting prior to submitting their plat to planning and zoning, and that planning and zoning will give notice of the planning commission's plat approval akin to that required under section 3.1.5 for zone map amendments, and this shall be at the applicant's cost. Right, that, pointing out as well that the applicant's submission of their motion has been amended to leave the discussion of manufactured housing to the development plan approval stage.
Correct, yeah, with the stipulation of like 4F that we talked about, yes.
That should probably read preliminary plat approval stage. We don't have a development plan.
Your director points out that discussion will occur at the preliminary plat phase because there will not be a development plan.
That's okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Does it, everyone understand
does
that the
everybody-
motion is on the floor and, yeah.
Does everybody have a clear understanding of the motion now before we vote on it? Yes, sir, you can speak.
I just wanted to ask about the buffer to match the plat that was approved a couple years ago. Does that make sense? Is that in the motion?
He was referring to the one section at the very top of the northern part had a buffer of trees. Was not identified on the other tracks below there.
So we did that 2 years ago. As part of the zone change, we required that
For that,
buffer.
for the commercial property at the
For
top
Right.
by the road.
Council has just indicated that they would be open to discussing proposed buffers at the preliminary plat phase.
You're okay with that? Okay.
And be insurance features and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we probably should add that particular onto the list of them. Thank you.
Dan, do you want to, you made the,
I'll accept
I
that
second your motion.
amendment into the motion. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Dan's motion and a second. All in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed to the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess the motion carries 5 to 4. All right. We'll go back to public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Billings.
The next item is
Okay.
Samantha Kiss, General Development Plan Amendment.
Why don't you, see you guys a little later, we got some more to finish.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So you want to read it, Michaela?
Sure. Samantha Cuss has applied for a general development plan amendment to change the conditions of the zoning map amendment to allow for residential use on 0.66 acres zoned office and professional district OP at 4169 Lexington Road, Boyle County. So this zone change went through, I believe back in 2020. Tanner Good was the applicant. This is the property known as Black Tie Real Estate. If you all are familiar with it, out on Lexington Road. So you can see where the OP is zoned here. This is the gas station and fire station, just the west of it. When this came through, Tanner Good agreed to the condition, which I'll put up the development conditions that were agreed upon and approved at the time of the zoning map amendment in 2020. And really, the big one was the applicant agrees only a real estate office use will be permitted on the property. The property has since gone to auction, and they are under contract, so Tanner Good technically still owns it. He has signed off on this application, but they are looking to sell it, and the applicant and new owner would like to use it for a residential, single-family residential use only. It was discussed at the meeting in 2020 that even if a residential use came in, it would have to come back through planning commission and go through this process. So you all have to approve it. The other condition that I crossed out here that it appears was not met as part of the real estate office, and now is maybe not necessarily applicable or necessary for a single-family residential use. It seems a little bit onerous, would be that 20-foot wide vegetative landscape buffer on the western property line or privacy fence. If you all want to keep that condition, that's to your discretion. I thought I would mention it because this is going to be a single-family residential use only. That would be a little bit onerous for the, the new owner. It should have been done at the time of the when the office was built and opened, and it wasn't, so. Are there any questions for me on this?
Is there a health department issue with going from a real estate office to a single family with respect to septic and?
They are gonna have to update the septic, is my understanding. They're going through that process with the health department, so there are gonna be updates to that. But as far as any other exterior changes on the site, none are proposed at this time. So just, yeah, the septic will have to be updated, to answer your question.
Is this only the building closer to Lexington Road, or is part of the property
It's,
like
the.
a trailer up on the hill behind it? I don't know if trailer's the right word, but a container.
Yeah, I'll let the applicant answer that, but my understanding is that the actual housing portion is that portion that's built in to the ground there, and then the shipping container is an accessory structure.
Hi, I'm Samantha Coos. So I think you're talking about the berm home that's in the back part, and the front part's the shipping container. We're wanting to live inside the berm home and keeping the shipping container the office professional use. Does that kind of answer the question?
Well, sort of. I understand you want to live in the front building closer to Lexington Road, but is the back manufactured building part of the property, or is it a different property?
If I'm understanding, the two-story part, is that the part you're talking about, like above it? Because there's homes behind the property that I don't know who it belongs to. The berm home's kind of like underground, and then they have like a second story above it, if that's like the manufactured part you're talking about. Yeah, it's connected.
There is a survey in your all's staff packet that shows the drawing of the site. I don't believe I put it up on the slideshow, I'm sorry. But it shows what's existing on the property. It doesn't show the shipping container because it was submitted with the previous zoning map amendment. But it shows where, the berm house is, so.
That's on the map, it's existing underground structure and
Yep.
above ground structure?
Yep.
And also for the septic, we have gone through the health department, and they've already surveyed the land, and we have that set up for the septic, for residential, if that answers that too.
And, okay, did you just say you want to keep it, you want to run a business out of there and live in it?
So we don't really want to run a business. We're just kind of doing this for the loan type that we want. So we would like to have like a residential use so we can get a residential loan to close on it. Because depending on how this meeting goes, we would have to do a commercial loan or a construction, and that's really high in interest. That's a huge down payment, and then we'd have to refinance. So in order to do the residential loan, we wanted to do residential use so we can start living in it.
Residential use only?
No, if there's anything on there that says residential use, then it's okay. The lender said that we can have it say real estate office or residential use, and it's okay for our loan. If that makes sense.
Can we get a reading on it?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's currently zoned office professional. That's the land zoning. And the condition that was placed is it could be real estate office or residential.
That's what's proposed. What was approved in 2020 was that it could be a real estate office only. So any other type of use as permitted when the office professional district was not permitted as a result of the conditions of the zone change.
So that's the
So
change.
what you all are considering today is that the only two things that could go on this site is a residential use or a real estate office use. That's
Or
if-
both?
Or
One or
both.
the other, or both? What's the question that's before us?
I mean, I would probably view it as being both. Both are permitted by right in the in the zoning district unless you want to get into primary and accessory uses. But, yeah, I mean, for when it becomes a residential use, it's restricted to, I believe, our R1B or R1C zoning district. Sorry, let me tell you definitively.
Besides wanting to live there, what do you all want to do with it?
Just live there. There's no plans for a business.
If all you want to do is live there, then why don't we just propose that it just become R1 whatever residential?
It is a middle structure.
Well, that would require a zoning map amendment.
Yes.
Which, poses a lot of issues because this property is on septic, so it can't go to one of our residential zoning districts, and it would even be difficult to bring it back to ag because it's undersized. So it could maybe go to the RR district, but that would require going through the full zoning map amendment process, whereas OP does allow for R1C residential use. So in my mind, she can use it as a residential use because it's been rezoned to OP.
Okay.
So I don't feel that needs a zoning map amendment.
That is a proper use of OP.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the permitted uses, so I would view it as a proper use of the office professional district, as residential use. It's a weird, I know.
The main thing that we're being asked is if we can strike what was a previous development condition.
Yes,
Nice.
yep.
And add the or residential statement in 5. Those are the
Correct.
2 changes.
Correct.
Yep, so you would be removing the buffer requirement. This was not an ask from the applicant. This is something I'm bringing forward to you all just because, for any other R1C development, we typically wouldn't ask for a 20-foot landscape buffer. She is primarily surrounded by agricultural uses aside from the gas station that's just down the street.
It's
and then
not,
asking for the
it's not
rest.
adjacent to it. It is down, there's property
Yeah,
in
it's not
between.
adjoining. There's one property in between.
Right.
So. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Smith.
So you spoke in favor of it because you'd like to live there. So is there anybody else that would like to speak in favor of this? Zone change? Okay, is there anybody that would like to speak against it? All right, then we'll close the public hearing and go back to the zoning meeting. Is there any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move to accept the motion, I move to accept the amendment, the development conditions as amended.
Okay, do we have a second?
I would second that.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. We got it. Let's go from the planning and zoning meeting back to the public hearing, and I think we have one more. Toby Heisen, is it? Okay. Has applied for general development plan. You want to read through that real quick?
Sure. Kobe Zeisen? Has applied for a general development plan amendment to change the conditions of the zoning map amendment to allow for automotive sales and service on 0.246 acres zoned highway business at 1103 Houstonville Road, Danville. So this property was rezoned back in 2021. I think some of you all probably sat on the commission for one or both of these. So the property is on the corner of Houstonville Road and Jean Drive here. You can see we're kind of having that highway business slowly creep down Houstonville Road there, and then it adjoins, some residential uses as you get further back on Jean Drive. The condition that the applicant is asking to have removed is, he had agreed to no auto-related services will be permitted on the site. I did go back and listen to both meetings, the previous application and this one, to hear if there was any discussion or concern about any of the conditions that we were lifting. For this one, there was one member of the public, one neighbor, that did come out and express concerns about auto-related uses. It was a topic of conversation during the meeting. It basically, part of the agreement was that, part of the understanding when they were going through the zoning map amendment is that it was gonna be limited to office professional uses or specialty retail, which at the meeting was described as basically low-intensity retail use. So I think the intent was to limit traffic and high-intensity uses at the site. So I think there was some concern expressed during the public hearing regarding this. This is a pretty small site. It's it's about 1/4 of an acre. I think there's 6 existing parking spaces on the site with an existing building. As part of this application, he wasn't proposing any exterior changes to the site. If he did, he would have to go through a zoning permit requirement, but they weren't proposed at this time. So, yeah, that's really all I've got. I'll let the applicant speak and explain what he's looking to do, so.
My name is Kobe Sasin. I was just looking to gain full use of the existing zone. So when I originally applied for the zone change, I was working with Mr. Hunter, who was great. He was excellent. He helped me in every way. And under his guidance, he suggested that I'd add the limitations before the zone change in case anyone was opposed. But I don't remember anyone being opposed or having any issues or concerns whatsoever. In fact, everybody that was in the neighborhood was in favor. So I'm only asking to have full access to the actual zone. Therefore, I'm not limited to other options as far as rental or anything moving forward, which of course it would be more beneficial to myself and my family as I attempt to get out of the house.
That is on a corner there, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And there's not a lot of, as the director said, there's not a lot of space in front of the house
No,
to the main street.
the front of the house is where we place the parking. So we placed, there's 7 existing parking spaces in the front.
There's not a lot in there.
No.
There is space as you go down the street there behind the house, in a sense.
Yes, at least twice the size as the front,
Yeah.
possibly more. And then, of course, we covered the boundaries, we fenced it in, so.
Because I'm like you, I was part of the meeting back then, Director, and it's hard to remember whether that was put on there specifically as a result of a conversation in the meeting.
Yeah, it was put on prior to the meeting, so it was just discussed as part of the proceedings
Okay,
when
yeah.
Steve was going through the conditions. But I think the way that the applicant is explaining it, we actually should probably be considering striking all of condition 4. If he's trying to get full use of the highway business district, because I think we still are pretty limited on what we would allow for that use if we keep the rest of the language for condition 4. So I think that's probably more accurately what he's requesting.
Isn't the highway business across to the other side of the street also already?
It is, yeah. A fair amount of Houstonville Road is highway business, but there's obviously some residential type uses, or at least residential looking structures along Houstonville Road as well. And, it adjoins residential to the rear.
What type business is there now? What are you doing with the property?
No, I currently live there. It's still under residential use. I haven't moved yet.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, didn't look like a business ever moved in, so.
No,
So that's
just,
fine. Yeah. All right, that's the advantage you have going back and forth here, so.
If you took out condition 4, it would still be in conformity with the zone.
Yes, that basically just wouldn't be putting a restriction on what's a permitted use within the highway business district. So condition 4, it's kind of like the previous application, we were limiting the type of uses that could actually be permitted, so the zoning district allows a much more broad use of, drive-through restaurants, gas stations, et cetera. So my view of it was condition 4 limited those uses to more of a office or, specialty retail, which is described as low-intensity retail type uses, probably more in conjunction with an office or things of that nature.
And those kind of car selling is something that happens in Danville a lot, in different houses arrangements, so it's not it's not new to the area, that's all I'm getting to. It's new to that spot, that's what you're asking for.
Yes.
Okay.
My memory of it, I was at the last meeting when you came, and my memory of it, we showed a plat of up and down 4th Street, and it was kind of a hodgepodge of zoning and mixes of business. And what he's asking for, in my mind, is not inconsistent with all the stuff around him.
Right.
Yeah. So. All right,
Thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
just to clarify, are we being asked to strike section 4 completely, or just strike
Condition 4. Yeah, I think
the
that's.
automotive?
I think that's better representation of what the applicant is asking. I wrote up, I pulled the conditions from the previous zoning map amendment, and I had striked out the no auto-related services, because that's what my understanding of his request was, but it sounds like more accurately it would be to strike all of condition 4.
Sure.
Okay. So we're in the public hearing phase of this, so we've had, does anybody else wish to speak in favor of it? Okay, does anybody wish, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, my name's Dean Burris. I own the property at 1105 next door to it. It's a rental. My main concern is Houstonville Road's just so busy. Them pulling out, and I'm not sure how he's going to have his cars parked out. Just make sure, they can see to get out, because that's a very busy road and it's tough getting out of that. And I feel like for what he's wanting to do, I feel like less than a quarter acres, pretty small. Cramming, to do service work and stuff like that too. Final question is, why was this put on after the Ghost Pike? Just kidding.
Sorry, I have to put public hearings in the order of applications received, so it's unfortunate.
Just kidding on that part. But anyway, I opposed it then and I'll oppose it now, but he does keep his property up nice now. I mean, I have no problem with that. I mean, he's always kept it nice, and hopefully, if you approve it all, I hope he still does. But that's all I have to say.
Anybody else wish to speak opposed to the change? All right. Let's go back into planning and zoning's regular meeting then, and open the floor for discussion of this. Is there any more discussion? Do I have a motion then?
So I'll move to amend the development conditions as noted by striking all of paragraph 4, or number 4.
Second.
To the movement in the second, I would suggest adding justifications that, reflecting on the evidence that was presented at the prior meeting, we find that the proposed expansion of use is not inconsistent with surrounding uses because there's other highway business there, and further that we are removing a condition that was not the applicant's initial intention at the previous hearing.
I'll accept that change to the motion. Please put it that way.
And the second.
Okay. Yeah, let's vote. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Both. Okay, do we have an advisory committee report? Anything from advisory committee?
Advisory committee did not meet. I would maybe ask before we go through the budget, if we could let Lyndon speak with the Bluegrass Area Development District. I think he's been waiting long enough,
been
and
very
then we can
patient,
go through the
yes.
budget and contract after, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Come on, Lyndon.
Thank you. I'm Lyndon Smith with the Bluegrass Area Development District. We've been working on your comprehensive plan update. And we're at the stage right now where we've got a lot of material to review. The Planning Commission, we've almost got the goals and objectives, finalized. They're available on the Bluegrass Ad website. There's also a draft of the comprehensive plan itself that's available on the website just for review purposes. The latest version I brought with me to hand out to each of you, but we've been talking about the prospect of maybe having a work group of the Planning Commission, a subcommittee, in order to review the text of the comprehensive plan itself. That's going to include all the background material, the inventory, the goals and objectives, but ultimately also the land use maps, future land use maps. And it's quite a bit of material to go through. So if we could, maybe 3 or 4 members have a working group where we could work through that material. We've got the entire plan very close to being done at this point. And so really now it's just a matter of going through the Planning Commission, looking it over, making checks and everything to see if everything you want is in there.
Now, is that the version that you can download or look at on the website right now?
Yes.
Right,
Have all the statistics been updated? I mean, all the population statistics?
Yes.
Yes. I've had the ability to go through, Wyndon, I appreciate, we've emailed in the last week or so, and I've had the ability to review what's up on the website. It's very well done so far, so I'd encourage everybody to go take a look at it. The changes are good, and, all the information in it has been updated, so.
So it's just on the Bluegrass Ad website?
Correct. Yeah, if you go there, bgadd.org, and you look for community development, and then on that page, records. And we've got both Anderson County and Boyle County going at the same time. They're up there. The goals and objectives that I brought with me today, they're not 100%. They include all the comments and reviews and notes that we've received thus far. However, towards the end, there's still a few things in there where we've been working on language and different ideas and things like that. So I do have this to distribute for you. If you could pass those around. And at this stage, we're so close, but it does require quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
And I would hesitate to come here under this setting and give each one of you a draft of the comprehensive plan. Runs about 100 pages, and when we include more photos and graphs and things like that, it's a substantial document. So that's just our suggestion at this point, is that there be a working group. We wouldn't necessarily have to have in-person meetings. It's just a work group where you look through the material, comment back on it by email. we can have like a Zoom meeting or something like that in order to discuss things through as needed. But that's what I've got for you today.
The group you're proposing, do they work at all on the flume, or does that come later?
Future land use map is part of that document. And so, yes, we would probably work on that as well, and all conditionally, so that the work group can come back to the full body and say, okay, we haven't just skipped over all of this. We have looked at it, and everything seems to be in accord with itself.
As far as the process goes, is there a point when we do community-wide meetings again to kind of discuss what the changes are either before our approval or before the legislative approval?
That's optional. You can. You're not required to, but it might be a good idea. Actually, the public is open to, review the material that's on the website themselves. So we may try to do public notice through the newspapers and say, hey, if you want to see and comment on this material, here it is.
Okay.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question on that too, because that's right. See, the public can see it, but we haven't got any really.
Well, yeah, and the form in which it's there, you can download a copy, you can mark it up, a comment on it. It's possible to make comments, so at this point, anybody can do that. Is there a form for collecting all of those and kind of distilling what we accept or don't accept? That's the only thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just don't know that we've really pushed that information
was-
outward, but
Yeah.
it's not intended to hide it. It's just I don't think we've emailed our Substack. What's our group? We've had people sign up via email
Oh,
for
yeah, we've got
updates of
emails
comp
from
plan
the first public meetings. We could
Yep, things like that.
communicate out.
Or post it on our website. But I think once we get the goals and objectives draft to a point where we're ready for that, that's when we would start pushing that out and opening up for that comment. But, it's out and available. It's just maybe not ready to be pushed to that point where we, I think Planning Commission might still have potentially the need for comments on it. But
It's a substantial document.
It is.
Absolutely. So it's,
Well,
to
we
absorb
were-
it's very difficult.
Well,
Right or
took-
wrong, we were criticized before for not getting enough public input or making it
Yeah.
transparent enough to the public. So
Yeah.
I think we do have to have public meetings.
I think we need to start ramping that back up here soon, once we get the work group in order, and we start getting to a place where we're comfortable. It's certainly time to start ramping up that public involvement
Yeah.
again. Yep.
But I think at this point, we could email our list and just tell them the draft is here, if there's
Yeah,
comments,
a partial draft, yeah.
a partial draft.
Because
right.
I don't think the future land use map is up on there yet, and
Sure.
obviously graphics aren't on there yet, but if they want to start reviewing the text and things, yeah. I mean, I have no issue with people starting to comment on it, so.
Excuse me, sir, what was that URL again?
Do you-
Bluegrass, bgadd.org.
I can send out an email following up, or Lyndon can send it out. We'll get that into your inbox,
Yeah,
so
and
you
it-
can just click
yeah,
on
it's
the
not,
link.
because it's several layers below that.
Yep.
You just have to search for it.
Community development records.
Yeah, once you get onto that home page, there's several different departments. It's under community development and then documents. And then it's a PDF file that you can download and mark up, yeah. But it's just that there's a lot of it. Of some 100 pages that make up the comprehensive plan, there's also all the raw data that you collect that goes into an addendum section, and just as a practical matter, will publish the plan, but the addendum could be 100, 200 pages of soil samples and geologic data and things that aren't necessary to be in there, but you need to have it to show that you considered it.
Should we take a vote on that working group, take nominations or volunteers?
Yes.
However you all want to do it.
Volunteers first.
Yep. I know we had kind of designated a few members when we first got this thing started. I believe it was it Tom and Terry?
I was on it, yeah.
Yep, and then I think maybe Sam and Dan were our backups, is that correct?
Yeah, and I haven't been reliable, so that's fine.
So.
Well, and I'm interested, so I'm more than willing to
Yeah,
help.
I'm still interested.
Is there anyone else that was interested? Well, it sounds like we got our four, so.
Yeah. You have 4 of us.
Okay. Well, that's it then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.
Michaela, do you want to do the personnel ahead of the budget or the budget first?
Yep, so Personnel Committee did meet, this is pretty standard for us, right around this time, just to discuss, essentially the budget and COLA and things of that nature. So they approved the 3% cost of living adjustment COLA raises for staff. And that was pretty much the meat of the conversation for Personnel Committee. Did you want to add anything?
No, I was putting it in front of budget because I figured budget acted on that afterward.
Yep. Yep, and so then the Budget Committee met later that day. Do you want me to run through it? Do you want to run through it, Terry?
You can run through it.
All right. I'll try and keep it quick for you all. There aren't too many changes. We had done the FY25 prelim budget several months ago. And so I brought a FY25 budget file through to you all. I tried to highlight some of the changes. I did miss line 21 there. So for the budget final, I kept the anticipated commission revenue the same. For the commission expenditures under personnel, in the prelim budget, I had shown a 2% cost of living adjustment. We typically match the county. This is what I explained to the Personnel and Budget Committee. We typically match the county. The county approved 3% COLA raises this year, so I bumped it up to the 3% for the final. So you can see that's about a difference of about $1,000 for salary, and then, you know, a slight increase for lines 23 and 24 because that's based on percentage of salary. For line 30, for workers' comp insurance, I had put the wrong number in there. For the prelim budget, I had accidentally put the D&E insurance in there, so I dropped that back down. So you're actually not seeing a significant change in commission or personnel expenditures when it's all said and done for the prelim and final. It went from 143,345 to 143,333, even with that 1% bump. For the office, so line 40, I had miscalculated what the Google Workspace fee was going to be. The intention of this is to get Google Drive to back up all of our scans. OneDrive, when it's all said and done, is not going to be sufficient enough. This is also going to allow us to partner with the PVA. They're going to start pushing data to us, updated parcel data, things like that. So we'll have more up-to-date data that we can start utilizing. So I think that'll be a big benefit for us. So that's a change of approximately $120 there. On the second page, the big change was line 51. So that was the D&E that had gone up, and I put it in the wrong section there. So you can see that about $300 increase reflected in line 51. And that was all I have for changes from the prelim to the final. If you go to the next section, that's the DHB. If you all recall, the DHB is going to be coming under planning and zoning, starting July 1. So I apologize, I didn't update this, but the 3% bump would also be shown on the part-time preservation coordinator, so line A there, and so that would be an increase of $469 to reflect that 3% bump, so it'd be a total of $15,769. And that was the only change I had for the DHB for the prelim versus final. So are there any questions for me on that?
Do we need a motion to approve it? I think we do.
I think we do, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the budget as presented.
You second it, Ms. Slate? Okay. All in favor? All right, motion carries.
All right, yeah, and the only other new business I put on was the technical specialist agreement. So you all met with Volker several hours ago now, but, like I said, I had met with them last week. I think it's really important that we get a technical specialist in here to help assist us with street drainage and stormwater review for unincorporated Boyle, Junction, and Pearville. This was approved in the prelim budget. I didn't change the numbers on the final. They've submitted a preliminary contract to us. Henry and I are beginning that review. I don't think it's ready to be signed yet, but I would ask that we authorize the chairman to sign it once Henry completes its review and gets it to a place where he feels comfortable. We're happy to send it out prior to having the chairman sign it, but I do believe we need a motion to authorize Jim to sign it on our behalf. If you all want to wait a month, we can. It will just delay us, having them start their review hopefully sooner. We have some applications that are kind of currently under review in the county. And Junction, Shelby Green, the next phase is going to be coming through soon. So I would like to get it done sooner rather than later, but if you all want that in front of you, it's just not ready yet. We just got it a day or two ago, so.
I would make the motion to authorize the chairman to approve the technical specialist agreement after it's been reviewed by Henry and Michaela.
Yeah, I'm fine with letting the chairman do
Okay.
that.
All in favor? All right, thank you.
All right, that was all I had.
Okay, do we have any announcements?
No?
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Slate seconds, all in favor? Quick hands. Motion carried.